Good evening, everybody. We have a nice guest today. You're going to have to mute for a moment.
Yeah, I'm trying.
It is the 19th of August today, and it's Saturday. It's quite sunny here in England. It's very hot where you are, isn't it, John? But anyway, welcome, John the Morgile.
Hello. Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, it is a little hot here, but I'm doing good, and good to be here with you guys, and really looking forward to just hearing what Chris has to say. I've never met Chris, but I know he sort of just joined, so I don't want to put him on the spot or anything. So I know Chris probably has a few things to get ready.
Very much enjoy what you're going to see, John the Morgile. But anyway, just to explain that Patricia's with us from the UK, Siri's from Holland, and Chris from Canada, and obviously John the Morgile's from America. And I think a few people are going to join as the hangout goes on. Anyway, we're waiting for Chris to get a few things ready. We're going to start with...
I'm just going to load up the model here and try and get some things going if you guys wanted to kind of kick it off with it.
I mean, we've got this very interesting stuff on arcing, mirroring, the stars, the moon. Some very interesting things which I think you'd like to see.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always good to see different perspectives. That's one of the things I think that it's gotten so much easier over the last couple of years is there's a lot more people looking into this now, and so like a million people can do way more research in a second than one person can do in like a year, right? So it's very interesting to see the different things that people are coming up with. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
And also, I think you find as you go on that there is probably a bit more information you can gather, but instead of having it in one place, it's always a bit here, a bit here, it's always all over the place and sort of hidden, and isn't it? And then you've got to put it all together in a different way because they're trying to hide everything. This is going to come on in 10 minutes. We're just waiting for Chris to get a few things ready, and I'm really sure you'll like all the stuff today, John. Here we go. I'm going to present Chris, and then if you want to ask anything, John, just say.
So just a question, I guess, John, just to see what you're familiar with and where you're at on things is, are you familiar with any of the Electric Universe and Thunderbolts project stuff? Have you looked at any of that type of plasma physics and Electric Universe?
To varying degrees, yes. Both of those things. I think Electric Universe is probably where it's at. Tesla was a big advocate of, if you want the secrets of the universe, think energy and vibration. So to me, it seems like everything is just different forms of harmonic resonance vibration, and that's where you get different density layers. And I'm familiar with plasma naturally generated up in they allege that it's in the lower magnetosphere, but so that's all very interesting stuff to me, and I may have some questions, but so yeah, definitely familiar and interested.
Excellent. So the Z-pinch type of idea and toroidal fields won't be a complete stranger to you. That's good.
Nope, not at all.
Let's skip some of that stuff. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the Google Earth globe model just because it's a quick and easy way to show how we've been applying some of the Electric Universe physics and that towards actual historical type of reconstruction, trying to break down what's been not truthfully portrayed from a geological standpoint, like break it all back down to the core of the iron earth that cannot maintain a magnetic field above its Curie temperature in any way, shape, or form. So we got to go right back to the core of the problem and then rebuild it with a new electric type of paradigm and see where things end up. So I've been taking that approach, just basically going back right to the flat plane, coming up with magnetic fields and trying to map out the field and base the map and the general idea from that philosophy. Wherever it ends up, but just follow the magnetic fields, and it should, I think, lead to some truth. This is
agreed. I mean, when you look at things like magnetic declination, it's just it really is ridiculous to where you have to in certain places of the world you have to adjust your compass even up to like 100 and close to 180 degrees to get to magnetic north. So go figure that one out.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and I'm from Canada too, by the way. So we trained up north, and I'm fully aware that once you get above 60 latitude north, compasses, you might just throw them out the window, right? Because they just don't work at all, hardly ever anymore. So very unreliable because there's two poles that are constantly moving up there. It's nuts. But
Chris, I have a question for you. What degrees north? How far north do you live?
Right now, I'm on roughly 45, I think, right now.
Okay, gotcha.
But I have lived up as high as 60, 65, pushing 70. Yeah. When I was working in the north, I used to work in the mining industry up in Fort McMurray and the refining, so up in the oil towns.
Okay, so then I've got actually a really interesting question to ask you, because I've been speaking with a gentleman from Bergen, which is over, in Europe. It's in 60 degrees north, so it's very far north. I guess maybe it's not. Maybe Europe is the wrong thing to say. It's like Norwegian, basically. Sorry, right. So he lives at 60 degrees north, and he gets 24-hour sun with maybe some twilight, but no nighttime for about 90 days, starting in the beginning of June and going to the end of August. So about 90 days. Do you get that at 60 degrees north in Canada, or is there something different going on in Bergen?
No, it's the same thing. Yep, same thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
through the summer months, if you're working a night shift, it's really annoying. So definitely.
Right. Okay. So,
yeah.
And it seems like, in America, maybe we're not mistaught, but we're just a little bit misled about that, because most people I've surveyed have thought that the midnight sun only applies to the Arctic Circle, and it only lasts about a month, sandwiching the solstice about 2 weeks in either direction. And so what this to me is a big globe killer. And that's what I'm all about is, poking holes in the heliocentric theory. If we were to go to, say, 60 degrees south, or maybe even 61 degrees south to account for the elevation of Bergen or Canada, then they should get 90 days of, no nighttime in the southern solstice. And I think that makes a lot of sense why the Antarctic Treaty set up at 60 degrees south as the, the barrier.
Yeah, and as far as I'm aware, in the south.
Sorry, can I just say that Artis and Judith have joined us? Artis is from Germany and Judith's from Israel. Carry on.
Yeah, I looked into that too, and is when you go on timeanddate.com and look at the solar map of the year, the annual sunlight. In the south, they only get about 6 days. I think it's from the 21st of December till the 27th. There's about maybe 5 or 6 days of what they call, just simple twilight. So it's definitely not the same as we get in the north.
I've seen it a bit. I went to Denmark, which is below Norway, and in June the sun was going around the sky. It was in the sky, but you couldn't see it properly. But you could see almost as if it was a setting sun.
Yeah,
it was there. It was on the horizon all night long, coming.
No, exactly. So what we've been doing here is, trying to build it up, like I said, from the magnetic field point of view. So, and electric, basically dielectrics, taking, going from electricity and magnetism, but taking the other side of the equation and now accounting for dielectrics and diamagnetism and the opposite polarity that's usually, for the most part is ignored in mainstream, and the understanding of plasma physics and electrostatic discharge and that type of idea. So, and how that can affect what we perceive and, morph light and cause things to focus in places you wouldn't expect them to see, and all that stuff is applied. This is just an example here on the Google Earth, which I claim no rights to Google Earth, etc. So just as a teaching tool here. This is Sundance in the United States, and you can see that there was a strike that hit the ground here and created a perfect type of star field. So obviously Sundance for the sun that appears in this impact. Well, it's not an impact crater, but this crater zone created by an arc flash, and you can see that it created a moat around the outside of dielectric materials, and probably more silicons and irons in the center where the peaks were raised up. That's just a basic charge distribution. I mean, it's the perfect arc strike. You can see that on a piece of plate if you hit it with a welder.
Right. Yep.
And the general, So the general blast area was like about that big. This is the town of Sundance, and you can see that it raised like calciums and different types of gypsums and different sands and silicates. And there's also others. This one, the moat type of effect around it with a raised center, and it, the lightning came across the ground and that sort of thing. And what's interesting about this is if you take this one, I'm just going to angle it a bit better so we're flatter, and I'm going to zoom out and we'll go to Devil's Tower here just so you get the idea of the distance here. Tower, yeah, right there. So I'm going to measure the distance between Devil's Tower for you.
Picture's not moved, Chris.
Say again, not moving.
Yeah,
Picture's not moved.
And I guess I'll just ask a silly question, but that appears as if it's an indentation, not an elevated area. That circular, it's like what they would call a crater, right?
Yeah, the one in Sundance is it has some raised features to it, but then most of it's been dug out in a negative type of digging effect. So the negative would tend to dig, and then the positive, which is 23 miles away, is Devil's Tower, which is where it's been raised up in basalt columns in those octagonal shapes of stone columns, and the octagons are caused by the the electric field and subsequent fracturing. So the Devil's Tower would have been temporarily liquefied because of the heat on the positive pole. Just kind of keep that in mind, right? The negative pole here in Sundance would have been more of a cold blast, right? So this would have been cold in the negative, and then the one in Devil's Tower, when you zoom in on that one, it would have been hot, right? So this would be the positive pole.
It's stuck again, Chris.
And it raised that structure up.
It's got stuck on the first one, the indent one.
On the first one, yeah. Yeah, this is good old internet for you, but I'll let it refresh here. But we're all familiar with what Devil's Tower looks like, right? So,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so this one just would have been raised up. And then when you scale out here, just to show you the actual, those are the two center poles. And then the entire strike zone is this, because there's more craters to the north. You can see where they were dug out in circular craters. Almost looks like, in some places, looks like the surface of the moon. And in the center of this here is looks to be like you can't really tell by color, but I would say that the center here is by the colors of, some reds. The peaks are raised mountains. And I would say that's going to be an iron hotspot, kind of in the middle where the major charge was first impacted the ground. And the overall distance of that strike crater zone that created both of those is 139 miles. So it stretches all the way from Devil's Tower, Sundance, Rapid City. It's just huge, right? But realistically, that's the small one. That's just a small one. Once you start to zoom out, you can see that the entire Grand Canyon and all that was formed in this same type of similar event. Now, whether it happened at the same time or these are cyclical events that tend to follow the same path just because of the irons and what's in the ground, that's quite possible too. They may not have all happened at once. But
so you don't agree, and I'm not saying that I do necessarily. So you don't agree with the theory that the Grand Canyon was carved out by the river over, millions and millions of years is kind of a silly phrase in my opinion, but over a long period of time. So you don't think that's true at all for the Grand Canyon?
Definitely not. No, the crater strikes, the zones are there. Like this is, the Grand Canyon. If I zoom in, so there's Lake Powell, Grand Canyon. There's a mountain here. What's the name of it? The Navajo Mountain, right? And it's a raised peak of darkness, right? You can see it was kind of hit with a strike, and the craters are just everywhere. Once you start looking around, you'll see all these little pockets and craters and dug out, right? So this would be raised up, and that's dug down. They're all inverted. And it's interesting too, because if you look at some of the topology of the Grand Canyon, you can see that on the outside, right, on the outside here in the plains, this is all carved out and is actually lower than actually on the inside, and then down where the river flows is actually above. When you do the topology of it, it's actually above some of the plains. It's completely inverted in some cases. Depends on where you look at it. You can see that. I was going to try and find a spot that kind of shows that. You can kind of see what I mean there, right? It's the top tuft is actually here at this layer, and this was all kind of carved out with an electric strike. It's kind of in reverse.
So it seems like there was some pretty violent natural, according to what, just following what you're saying, make sure we're on the same page. There's some pretty violent natural electromagnetic happenings going on at some point in the past.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, I can show you a couple other spots here too you might find interesting. This is just to show you how the pattern is quite recognizable, repeatable. It happens everywhere. Everywhere you find a pole. This is in West Africa. So this is, what's the name of this place? Is Mauritania in West Sahara Desert. And here we have the same similar like we saw in Sundance. So you have a circular pattern with dielectric materials, salts, gypsums, that type of idea, and the same circular kind of a flat region. So this would be depressed. And then there's some raised areas around it where it kind of dug out and created the moat type of effect and dug out the plane. And then this area here is hot welded tuft. So you can see where the heat actually fused some of this and burnt and created like a crust, which remained relatively stable after the impact of the electricity. And there's another little crater in there. Then you go directly to the northeast of it, which is, I'll measure it here just to make sure I got the numbers right. Is almost the same distance, right? 126 miles. And this zone here is the positive iron pole. You can tell just by looking at it. They're actually in here in Zurat, I think, as I might say that. So this is the town right here, and there's a fully functional airport to give you a sense of the scale. And they're just now starting to get in here with a mine. You can see they're doing some open strip mining here, obviously digging out the iron rich ores. They're just starting to scratch the surface. I mean, obviously that's iron ore mine, right?
Yeah, you can definitely tell.
Right. You know what that is, right? And they're just starting to scratch the surface. So this entire mountain thing here is, and in it by itself from tip to toe here approximately is, they got 18 miles yet to go. So they'll be digging into that for a while. Right? Yeah. This would have been the main pole. And then during the strike, there's obviously secondary strikes that happen simultaneously that they're brought up. This looks like it's probably a carbon-rich coal. So, when we have like batteries, you have a dielectric battery or a capacitor. You'll have your dielectric source, which is your catalyst, usually of a liquid type salt water. And then your carbon will actually create a superconductor capacitor system. And you just stack them, right? Basically that's what we're seeing here is a giant superconducting battery two poles make connection.
So those are basically made in moments, yeah? Those mountain range, whatever it is that's happened around them, they've been made in a moment.
Absolutely,
the hills,
yeah.
mountains.
Those two pole strikes would have been like almost instantaneous, and you can kind of see where it tracked. The plasma field would have, the plasma storm and the heat would have tracked its way through here and set up frequencies and vibrations and earthquakes, and it flowed. All that water probably started, if you follow the original path, it started in northern China. Dugout over here is where the strike probably started making contact with the surface here in this would be the Polynesian Philippine Islands area here north of Australia. So there's two poles here that started, and it started working its way around or across. In our case, on a flat plane, started working its way across all the way around. And the scale is just, it blows your mind. The scale of it. Indicator between the United States and South America, you can see that there's a series of islands here in a perfect arc, and this has been dug out. I measured this earlier. It's about 1,600 miles by 650 miles wide. Sirius could give you the depth data on it because he's got all the GPS and the depths there. So it's quite a deep excavation. And your mind thinks, oh well, that's a pretty unique geological feature. But then all of a sudden you say, okay, well keep that picture in your head, 1,600 miles, 650 miles wide, and just look to the south of South America. Well, there it is again. It's identical, right? There's your little ring of islands, 650 miles wide, 1,600 miles long, exactly the same, right? So once those four poles started making contact and you got the circuit completed, all of the oceans on the entire plane would have been connected all at once. And just imagine how much energy that would have contained. Once it started, it was like a runaway train, right? There would have been nothing stopping that.
You also that was a big electric currency going all over the earth. Also, I've found another one for you, Chris. But as you know, I can show you, but on Google Earth I can't show you because that doesn't work for me for some strange reason. But this is basically, can you see this?
Can I just say, artist, that Anthony Riley's joined us.
Yeah.
Hi guys. Hi John.
Yeah, just to go a little
Tony.
bit.
You
can also.
Listen, guys. I'm going to be listening. I'm going to just run outside and smoke a cigarette. I'm going to mute myself, but I will be listening. So, and I'll unmute when I come back.
Okay. Well, this is the Bering. You can read it. The Beringer crater in Arizona, USA. If you type in Barrington crater just on Google Earth, it will find it. It has a 360 thing, and you can see here are the positive and negative strikes. And what's striking to me that the mountains between those strikes are completely cut off. It's like they cut off top with a knife, so they are flattened on the top because all the mountains surrounding that are still having their points. You can see this is normal, looking a bit more like a mountain. This is still has their peaks on it, and here the peaks are cut off. So possibly the strike sliced those tops of the mountains right off. I have another example in Kazakhstan, where also a lot of spherical balls are lying all around all around this side. There are all kinds of spherical balls lying around. You can also see this is totally it's almost like you have a piece of clay and you go with your fist across it and smear it out on the map. You can also see that everything is pushed aside. Here you have all kinds of rippling effects. I can't zoom in because this is just a picture and my Google Earth isn't working, but you can see all kinds of rippling effects. Also here you can see a mountain completely cut off. And this is it's a strike zone in India. You can see those mountains ranges.
That one there is a good example because you can see that it's like a mirror image of itself. There's a charge that went right down through the center of it, and it's just like a mirror on one side and on the other, and the features are similar, which gives you, it's a clear example of a balanced wave type of electric discharge. It's equal on both sides, right? And it did the same amount of energy distribution and created the same features. Yeah, perfect mirror.
This looks almost the same. Yeah. You can also see all these strike zones on the left of it. And you can see the ripples effect on the right.
So if you imagine, you can kind of keep that picture up there if you like, but so you imagine that all the ones that are raised with the craters, you'll have a variance of negative, positive in the craters and the raised areas. And as that energy is entering into that region, it's going to cause a rippling and sonic wave effect and frequency on the outside of that boundary layer. And it's just going to be like a vibrating table raising up all these mountain ranges on the outside. So it's like it would have been a huge earthquake all at the same time. You would have electricity, heat, liquefaction of the substrate, melting iron, and then all these mountains being vibrated violently in an earthquake all at the same time. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, I've got a question. So I'm sort of thinking about this, and it makes a lot of sense, but I'm wondering, like, okay, let's say all this stuff happened around the same time or as a result of a similar event. And it may have taken, like, I'm like picturing inside of a plasma ball, right? Everybody knows what the inside of like a plasma ball looks like.
Yep.
Yeah, and so like I'm picturing like all of the like lower density gases like helium and hydrogen that rise up, and then the lower density gases, and we've got different layers of things and rivers, like you say, the Grand Canyon and all this different stuff. But so what if, and I know this is just sort of going out on a limb here theoretically, but what if there was sort of some sort of like plasma, electromagnetic, ionized gases, plasma striking all over the Earth like a giant plasma ball at some point, and that's what released all the different types of gases and created all the different types of minerals. I don't know do you think something like that happened where this was one massive worldwide event, or do you think it had something that happens, periodically, or
it could be one of those cataclysmic events that wipes out a whole civilization in one foul swoop and we have to start again?
There's that, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's been, if we just think of entropy and how entropy works in a classical sense with Brownian motion and just energy distribution in a system. So it would have started with a certain charge capacity, and so you would have had an event, and then it would have settled down, kind of balanced its phase, started to build up charge again, and then blasted again. So it would have like this type of wave. So it might take thousands of years, the first one, that type of thing. But I definitely think there's been cyclical, these events have been kind of cyclical and gradually reducing over time, becoming less violent and less extreme. But clearly in the past, we had ancient cultures that built with huge stones, huge walls trying to hold back oceans, and they were digging into the ground, people digging underground for 8-10 stories deep, trying to stay warm and protected from these cataclysmic events, even in some cases to no avail. Like if you look at Cappadocia and Turkey, that's another great example, and the giant spheres of Costa Rica that came raining down upon the people, eventually becoming the Olmec heads and that type of idea. Right? They went back and tried to rebuild. They took the spheres and carved them into different objects, fearing the gods and destruction and everything they could do, right, to try to ward this type of thing off.
When I look at pictures like this, or anywhere across the world where you see what I would describe as ruins or remains, they often look as though they were being worked on at the point when they were abandoned, indicating that whatever happened that caused these to be abandoned happened really quick. And it's almost like it's like the end of a civilization for me. It's like the final chapter of the book, because you can see that with all of the megalithic structures like Göbekli Tepe and stuff like that. I know that was under the sand, but they all look like they were literally there 1 minute and then covered up or abandoned or left to rot instantly. And it's as if, can you imagine the skies turning into like this big electrical storm, wiping out everything that was capable of conducting a charge or whatever, and everyone died. I also see it as though it's the evolution of civilization where they evolve as a civilization to a point where technology and consciousness gets to a certain state, and the tinkering with it, and they tinker with it a bit more and carry on tinkering with it, and then eventually it collapses, and whatever they were tinkering with last is the cause of their own demise. Kind of what we're doing with our own environment, our own climate. It kind of looks like it's a man-made catastrophe that we're seeing the remains of, thinking that they were fantastic, but actually they fucked up. That's the way I read it, and that's how I look at it when I see a lot of these things.
Well, and the last thing that you would want to do is to put something that is balanced yet can become very volatile to balance itself. The last thing you want to do is start throwing shit out of balance, right? And it seems like we've been doing nothing but that for the last 100 years. So. And then
you look at Operation Fishbowl, and depending on how you interpret what they were doing at that time, it seems as though they may have found the firmament and decided to blow shit out of it, thinking like, oh, well, let's see if we can break our way out of here. And you think, well, if that is what they were doing, why would you even be doing that? You don't want to be breaking through something that's impenetrable because it's there to protect us. Yet that appears to be what they were doing by all accounts, as far as it can be seen. Mankind.
Who knows what they were doing? But the whole claim that they were firing nukes up there, I'm convinced that the whole idea of nuclear fission as well as nuclear fusion are theoretical and don't exist in reality. So
yeah, we can tell. We can tell too that that many of these structures and like Anthony was saying, I mean these were standing structures obliterated in an instant and forever atomically changed. There's many cases of some of the ruins in Egypt and elsewhere where you can actually see that the stone itself was molecularly changed. Right, it's now starting to crumble and turn into powder, whereas there was one beside it that wasn't struck with the electricity and it's still freestanding and just as solid and perfectly tuned as it was the day it was made. But the one beside it is falling apart.
Sure, and I guess maybe I should rephrase and say that hot atomic fusion is theoretical in terms of that's what's going on inside of the stars, right? And atomic fission in terms of nuclear bombs, I don't think that people have the ability to split atoms, and atoms are still sort of on the theoretical side. And even though atomic weight and chemistry all works, numerically and mathematically, it's all very much theoretical. Nobody's ever imaged an atom, nobody's ever imaged an electron, and so even when we try to observe them, we can't. And so it's I guess, and the only thing that nuclear has going for it is nuclear power, and of course that's just steam power. They're heating up, they're creating heat by encasing a radioactive isotope and boiling water with that, and so steam power. Anything else I think is just it works mathematically, but that doesn't necessarily mean the theory is correct.
John, have you seen these stones, these round spherical stones that he's about to show? Oh, maybe not. Ignore me.
Yeah, I am familiar with the spherical stones that they've found, and I'm interested in learning more. I have heard about them a long time ago, and there they are. Yeah, I've seen those on TV.
Chris?
Unmute myself here so you can hear me talk here. Yeah. So this is where we're going with it next, right? So you imagine that major cataclysmic event. It's let me go back first a second. I want to show you Cappadocia first, and then you kind of have to follow the path of electricity here. Cappadocia, Turkey, and just look at some images of that first. That's all I got to do is just search for Cappadocia, Turkey, and you'll find it. They call these fairy chimneys, and you'll notice that on the top there's a welded tuft on the tops of every one of these fairy chimneys. And in some cases, you'll still see that there's actually an iron stone perched like a bird on the top of all these peaks, and there's hundreds of thousands of them. Now, in this area, there was 60 or 70 cities that are mentioned in historical context, biblical stories, all destroyed within an instant. And you can obviously tell that there was a door there. Now there's no longer a door. There was a cathedral ceiling, gone. Right. You'll see that there was a church here type of thing carved into it. There's stairways going to nowhere, bits and pieces here's a series of rooms that are only half, there's no door in, but there's 4 rooms in a row with a tunnel between them, no longer functioning. And it's clear, you can just tell by the blast wave that came from the top down. This is probably one of the better ones to look at. We'll stick to this one's pretty good, but they're everywhere, right? I mean, it's just picture after picture. So the blast wave came down, and what happens is, I'll show you how these columns here work. These are the same. This is the same area. So what happens? See, discharges from the plasma above, making contact with the ground. There's a very straight charge that comes down through the ground and makes contact. And around that, we know in all conductors, it starts to create a vortex of your conducting around, which is like a conducting coil. And that creates pressure on the inside of it to stabilize the structure and make sure it stands. While on the outside of that field becomes negatively charged and is blasted away and taken upwards. So everything in between that was removed and cast way up into the plasma cloud and the storm, and it would have been just cataclysmic. Yep. So if you happen to have been standing in this doorway here, all of a sudden you're standing there having your breakfast, and all of a sudden you look out, your neighbors can have blue sky, right? Instantly. And you would have seen, people being cast up and being carried away, and anti-gravity effects, and it just would have been unfathomable.
Which coincidentally, if you think about this in a biblical context, that would be described as the coming of Christ, right?
I don't know if you would describe it like that, but it could be.
Well, everybody rises up with the coming of Christ.
Well, certainly ascension, right? That type of idea with the souls being carried up into the heavens, right? People just being carried up aloft, ascending into the heavens. Yeah.
But equally, it could have been another kind of cataclysmic event that killed everybody. So it could go either way depending on your premise, and you're not really sure how to interpret what we're looking at because there's no evidence to tell us what we're looking at other than the way we see it. Which then, for me, take back to the Libyan glass thing, because we see evidence in Algeria, in Egypt, in Libya of these Egyptian glass things, and if you take a biblical context to it, it appears that Sodom and Gomorrah may well have been true. But on the other hand, I prefer to think, well, that Libyan glass context might be another example where mankind were having some kind of war where they were killing each other, and that's the remains of it, the leftover from like some kind of nuclear warhead or something like that, where they'd all detonated and killed each other. And what are we looking at? Are we looking at the result of civilization being wiped out again, or are we looking at something biblical and proof of creation or some other intelligent design? And the answer is it's open to the interpretation from the eye's perspective. And we just don't know what we're looking at. But these things are so out there that mainstream flat Earth just don't get really wind of. I mean, nobody really knows about these giant stone spheres that roll up on the coasts of a lot of the southern continents. A lot of people don't realize that there is evidence out there that both supports biblicalness but also supports mass extinctions as well. And it's like, whoa, where does all this come from? We don't get taught any of this in school.
Yeah, I can present some other photos that are big just like that. You like?
Yeah, just to go back here. So that's the first event, right? You have the Cappadocia. Yeah, so you have the Cappadocia. Everything's lifted up into the air, huge clouds of volcanic ash in a charged plasma field, right? So that's kind of step number one. Then you have this atmosphere above that's full of all this particulate matter. What's that?
It's got stuck again. Okay. Your picture's got stuck.
Chris, just if you, before you go any further on the glass bit, I can show you some pictures of the same type of cataclysmic things in mountain regions all over the world. I just found the old pictures I had on my computer.
Yeah, just let me go through the steps here first, and then we can come back to the...
Okay, because this is both basically stone mountains, and maybe I thought I could interject that before you were going on of those glass things. I'm
not going to get into the glass just yet, but I want to do the A plus B equals C thing first, and then we can jump into that. Yeah.
I just want to present some pictures extra, so you can really so that people can really understand the whole broadness of the spectrum of all kinds of mountain pushers out, strange things on the earth. But go ahead.
Okay, yeah, so first you have the blast wave coming down with the negative pulling everything up. We got the sky full of particulate matter in a charged, dense field. And then as all that matter is up there...
Is that where you're supposed to be?
Yeah, Cappadocia. So this is step number one, right? There's the first blast wave. Then the second thing that happens is once it's all taken up into the air, lightning strikes and ball lightning starts to happen in the charged plasma cloud. But because it's already full of silicates and dust and particles, with each blast within the cloud itself, it creates a perfect sphere. And then because it becomes so dense, it goes from a state of being well distributed, being instantly fused into a 30-ton ball. Then it has no choice but to start raining back down upon the people that were already, they got hit once. Now it's going to start raining 30-ton balls right behind it. So this is the next wave of the event happening right behind that. And then of course they later on, after it's all settled down, they carve them into the Olmec heads and so forth. So it's kind of the step number one, step number two. And we know this because when you look at even today in the volcanic ash cloud storm, or even as recent as Pompeii, we find that in the ash is perfect spheres of now it's a much smaller scale because our system has now lost the charge. So it's obviously not as violent as it was in the past. But the process is still holding true. So there's scientific backup that is what does and can happen within clouds that create their own weather like this.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, actually.
Right. So bang. And I just saw one in the news here too, somewhere in the United States. A fellow was just he thought it was like hailing ice, but yet it was sitting on his car in the middle of the summer and it didn't melt. And he went out and he looked at it and it was perfect glass beads, right? And it made the news. So it still happens today, but a lot smaller scale.
And when you say it makes a lot of sense, this is technically like applying the application of the mantra of the ball earthers, which is essentially logic and reason. Well, if you look at things logically and reasonably, these are the dots that you start joining together and it starts to create a picture. Yeah, have you ever heard any ball earther talking in this kind of capacity, this context in any way whatsoever? I've never heard a conversation like this from any side, any ball earth side. Yet this is essentially logic and reason. You're looking at the evidence, you're looking at the logics behind it, and a lot of it does make sense.
Yeah.
The ball model doesn't explain this type of stuff really, because you can't have that much charge in a liquid iron core type of construct, right? It wouldn't hold up because liquid hot iron can't hold a magnetic field, and to get electric discharge of this scale with such a rapid and violent discharge requires a whole lot of dielectric capacitance, right? That's hydrogen and carbon and water, right? Nothing to do with hot iron, right? So it's I get what you mean, right? It's impossible to explain it on a ball model, right? And they just overlook it, right? You can't do it. Not enough charge.
So what sort of things could increase that charge again? I would imagine, like, if a volcano goes off, that's going to release a lot of dust and silicates and molten things into the sky, and so that I guess volcanoes create their own sort of electric storms and stuff. And so if something as massive as like the Yellowstone caldera were to go up, that would cause some pretty major side effects, right?
Yeah, it's the way this is working. It's actually the reverse of what modern geology would tend to say, right? They say, oh well, for some reason the hot iron core builds up pressure because it gets hot, and then it builds up pressure and blows the top off a mountain, and they call that a volcano. Well, in actual fact, I think it's the reverse. First comes the electric charge that builds up the heat through induction in the substrate underneath, and it's the electric field that's actually driving the molten pressures and the molten lavas and so forth to come to the surface. So I think it's important to understand this, because if you get how it works, then you have a great predictor for being able to say, oh well, we're building up a charge in this zone that's abnormally high, so that's increasing our chances of having a volcanic eruption or an earthquake or whatever. Because all we do now is use seismoscopes and try to listen, and you get half an hour warning. But if you were seeing a charge differential building up in a certain area over weeks or months, well, it's like, well, here it comes. Right? You get time to react to it.
But nobody's looking at it like that. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody's looking at it that way.
Chris, is it worth getting onto?
They'd know it was flat, because things like this can only happen in
a dielectric plane. Yeah.
Chris, is it worth getting onto at some point how the sun appears to be cooling down, and the global warming hoax, because the Great Sun Cycle.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. If we can get onto that, maybe.
Yeah, and I'm going to touch base just on the Libyan glass, and then let RT's show what he wants to show here. And let's see if I can find it real quick here too. Libyan, make sure I spell that right. Libya, Libyan glass desert.
What's interesting with the Libyan glass desert, Libyan glass stuff, is look at what Wikipedia age it at. They say it's something like 14 million years old. 26 million years old, and I'm thinking it's not that old. It is old, but it's not that old. For me, it's the creation of man messing around, essentially. I think that's what it is. I think man's able to manipulate stuff, and whilst they're learning, they make mistakes along the way, or it's evidence of war, a previous war from a previous civilization. Yeah, but I don't think it's 26 million years old. I think it's much more recent than that, and I think it's man-made.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm still looking for evidence of that. I haven't found anything that would, other than natural events, was huge cataclysmic events.
Sorry, yeah, I don't mean man-made in that context. I mean man triggered it. Maybe a consequential.
Yeah. I mean, if we were building Sarge and became too charged and we triggered it, that's quite possible. If there's something like that tied into it, and they didn't really realize what they were doing.
Yeah, and obviously, if there was
they triggered it, then it just
if there was some kind of atomic charge that was able to be created the way they tell us, and I know John doesn't necessarily buy into that idea, but if it did exist at some point in future, and there was something that blew up in the middle of the desert, a lot of that sand would end up being glass as a result of some kind of crazy amount of heat. So I mean, that makes it, even if it was detonated in the sky, some of it would burn into stuff, and then that kind of would explain where it comes from, making me think it's a war of some kind.
Well, that's what I wanted to show you right here. It's exactly that. You're exactly right. This is Norbert Bruget's work in Germany. Brugge or Bruget in German. I'm not sure how to say his last name there, but Norbert's his first. Spoken to him via email, and I've received his permission to share his work in public. He's a geologist, and he's been working in glass thing for apparently like a decade or more. And he's analyzed it to the microscopic level here. And he's got lots of images that show that with the gas inclusions, it's a lot of it's, and the gas is actually rich in hydrogen and nitrogen and rare noble gases, but there's bubbles of noble gases within the glass itself, which indicates that it was created within a plasma storm, a plasma type of discharge, because it was formed at or above 2,700 degrees or higher, pushing 4,000 degrees to make this happen. And it was still liquid and moving, which is why these bubbles are now stretched like they're in a blender, right? Cookie dough in a blender going around in a circle. And it was formed instantly. And this is the only place where we find this glass is in the Libyan desert. And they've speculated, it came from off planet, right? Well, no, I think it's the sand that went up and was separated by charge differential infused with titanium, because at high altitudes in a plasma storm and then fell back down. And or this is total speculation, but whatever the discharge arced out to, like a sprite, how sprites will come out of the tops of the clouds and go upwards towards something. It could be total speculation here, but it could be parts of what we perceive as the dome that we're looking through. That's total speculation. But either way, it formed in a hot, very extremely hot plasma type of electrical situation. He doesn't relate it to flat Earth in any way, but the science here is it'll blow your mind when you look at the science and the geological composition. And he's also showing in the Libyan desert, here's great pictures of the basalt around those craters I was showing you. You can see where this is all molten iron that was raised up in those circular fashions, right, in the Wabi Desert, right. So all this welded tuft is all molten iron.
Chris,
so clearly electric.
Are you familiar with the Beryl incident in Algeria, the nuclear testing site for the French?
No.
At some point I think it was in the 50s or the 60s, the French were in Algeria and they were messing around with nuclear weaponry of some kind. And they basically they created a Chernobyl type exclusion zone where nobody can go there because it's still suffering from radioactivity from whatever it was that they were doing. And that's also a place where they find some of that desert glass. As far as I believe, it's called the Beryl incident, Beryl, and that's another incident where that Algerian desert glass, the Libyan desert glass, it can be found, but in that particular place, it's totally radioactive. If you go there, you probably die. They say. Yeah,
no doubt. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, those are the temperatures that it takes, and the thing that's the really tie-in here that is key for me is that you can see that when we think hot temperatures, we think positive, and we think iron and molten steel and et cetera, et cetera. But this is the opposite side of the equation, because these formed at such extreme temperatures, but the chemical composition is carbon, oxygen, magnesium, aluminum, calcium, titanium, and then iron is just a small part of it. But the primaries are carbon, oxygen, aluminum, and titanium. So very rare stuff, right? Infused with hot gases.
So, Chris, let me...
and that's, I think, why the Egyptians do the... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I think I'm lagging a little bit. Yeah, I was just going to ask you, for the longest, I've not been under the impression that the sun is like a physical ball object, but, we see it as a circle in the sky. But what do you think about the sun possibly being something, similar to a plasma and an electromagnetic phenomenon as opposed to a physical or, hot atomic fusion thing, of course. And then what about the sun and moon being like an anode and cathode, and maybe those are causal or have to do with these periodical, plasma storms and stuff?
Yeah, I 100% agree. That's exactly where this all leads to. That's the natural conclusion that I would draw for sure. If you look at Dr. Pierre Robitaille's work from the Electric Universe, he's got some amazing work on the sun, and he's basically shown it to be a crystal lattice type of structure that's based on hydrogen, but the hydrogen is actually like a dust particulate. Each atom is like a crystal, and it's more of a cold fusion type of thing, and the emission coming off of it I would think is a focal point in a magnetic field, more so than a solid physical object. And the moon we're seeing the same thing in the work with being also a semi-transparent powder type of dielectric material, aluminums and titaniums and
chocolate
the opposites. Yeah, it seems to be more like a flat disc, but it's also hollow. Yeah, it's hollow, and it looks like we're looking at both sides at the same time. So no matter where you look at it, you see the same image facing you all at the same time. But it's because you're actually looking through it, and it's we're coming out of the group on that.
Well, here's another thing.
Totally agree.
Here's another thing too. Our eyes are convex lenses, and the atmos plane sort of creates a convex lens around us all subjectively. And so any light source that was bright enough to be seen from the ground, I think whatever shape it is, it would appear to be perfectly circular because of the atmosphere, or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's like a double convex. Yeah. And when you really look with the extreme scrutiny at the terminator line on the moon, you can see that it's not a periphery. It's definitely a flattened ellipsoid type of I might be able to show you some of that after too, but we've got some evidence that you can see within the shadow line, the craters are being duplicated on being projected through it. And you can see the same images, but one's in shadow, and you can see the thickness of it. So I can show you some of that after. I'll let everybody kind of get a rough idea on the electromagnetism and what's really going on.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, man. I'm all about it. I think it makes a lot more sense than what we're told, and explains a lot. So yeah, I think it's more plausible than anything that globe Earth theory comes up with. And like you said, to have this sort of thing, you have to have a dielectric plane. And to me, that's why they won't even start looking at it, is because when you start looking at planes and electromagnetism and these effects, and then you start looking at it logically, there's really only one conclusion, isn't there?
I'll show you jump over RTs again.
Artis is going next. We'll come back to Chris in a minute. Right, Artis, your turn. Whoa.
Okay. I just want to show Chris can probably give a better view about what we are seeing here. But it's basically all the strange mountains and crystals that are in the white desert in Egypt. Maybe Chris has heard about it.
Yeah, I've seen those, yeah.
I have some pictures. I have some pictures that I can share, so I will later send them to you, but I just found them. So you can give your view on that, about what you are seeing. Will that work out, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Well, this is the first one. These are the crystals in the white desert in Egypt.
I think you might need presenting, Karen.
I can see it. Oh, well, hang on.
Yeah, and you can see how two of those were there seems to be some evidence of being heated on the top and slightly melted on the top, but still underneath it's nice, perfect crystal.
Yeah, and they go up about to your knees, so they're not that small. And
there's
here
you
can also see here, you can see those spherical balls on the ground.
So that looks like a lot of gypsum type of materials and white clays, and salt. Yeah.
This is from above. You can see that all kinds of circles. Here, a big one. This is also in the white desert in Egypt. This is from another time. You can see more. I just put it in Photoshop so you can see more difference in structure. And this is also in the white desert. You can see strike.
They did this at school, did they?
Yeah, more.
No, it's interesting too, right? If you look, this stuff has been out there for a long time. David Talbot and his Electric Universe group, I mean, they've been working on this stuff for a long time, but every time it tries to make it into the mainstream, it gets completely censored. If you go on Wikipedia and look up Electric Universe, it's been banned. There's not even a term for it. And then there's a little bit of a side link or something to plasma cosmology, but then it makes it seem like it's a pseudoscience by a bunch of crazy guys, and there's like 3 or 4 references. But that's it. You can't find it in Wikipedia. It's actually been censored.
Yeah, what's funny is this, Chris, you have that white desert with all those mountain crystals, and just at the rim of that, you have these black mountains.
Yeah, the huge iron perimeters. Those iron ones, what happens is the iron gets pulled up because it's positive, and then it becomes fused, and it creates like a dike system. And when lightning hits sand, and it goes down into the sand and creates like a fulgurite tube. It's just like a tube cave, like roots going deep into the ground. If it goes deep enough, because it's basically trying to connect with the water that's underneath in the dielectric plane. So it has to go through the silica, through the salt to connect to the ocean. And that's when the circuit is connected. And when it does that, what happens after the fact is, well, now it's got an open tube of glass and the water comes rushing in, right? And or lava in some cases. If it's a positive pole, you'll get a lava stream coming up through the tube that was created by the lightning first, and or water in the case of dielectric. Yeah, same thing. Yeah. So to get that kind of structural differential within something like that, it takes a charge and heat localized, right, to make it stiffer than the rest of it. Then the wind and water just blows the rest of the way, and you're left with a column standing there too after the rest has been essentially obliterated. Yeah.
You can also I have some other pictures that are why doesn't this my internet froze for a second.
Chris, want to show the next bit?
Well, you will show just a couple of pictures, and then Chris can go on with his story. This is in Australia.
Well, you like finding these pictures, don't you, Artis?
Yeah, I can go on for hours if you want to. like a strange thing from the sky. You can see this wave rock Western Australia near an old excavation. You can see those pillars. This is in Australia again. You see all those lines, mountain. It looks like it was pushed up from Earth to the surface. This is also those kind of mountains or something else. Well, Chris can go on with this presentation, but I just wanted to show you some extra photos so you can understand that they are all over the world.
Thank you, Otis. Back to you, Chris. Are you there, John?
I am here, and something that just sort of came to me, in all this is, I always come back to biblical references. Of course, the story of Lot and his wife, turned around, to look at Sodom and Gomorrah, and what was she turned into but a pillar of salt? So maybe there is a grain of truth to all that.
Absolutely, and that's kind of what I'm going to show you right about now. Is I'm going to rotate this around a little bit so we can get a little bit better view of it here. This is a little bit more recent history, but not that far back. We know the story of the fall of Rome and the Nero. Nero sat and played his lyre or whatever, and he watched the city burn and that type of thing. He couldn't do anything about it, right? And obviously he couldn't, because if you look at the strike zone, there's actually a town in this crater here, or a couple of them. So, thousands of people living in here. But there's the crater with a raised dome in the center of the crater, and it's all been pulled out around it. And then there's a secondary moat. So you can see it was polarized positive, negative, positive, negative, positive, negative. Blew out a crater up here in the top, and then distributed the electricity here. And then when it had negative here, and dug out these zones that filled in with water and the whole crater rim. So you can obviously see that was a blast site. Boom, it happened there. And we'll say that one is positive. It was just to the north. And again, you see the craters around the outside.
When are you going to do your thesis and have it peer reviewed, Chris?
Yeah, I'm not too worried about that these days. No,
right.
I wonder which peers would even consider reviewing it, let alone dismiss it.
Yeah, it would never happen.
I think it's amazing that Chris has found all this and put it together. Artist does different things and look at all the pictures he finds, but it's just amazing. I love it.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like I said, I'm drawing on the electric universe principles and David Talbot's work, and all the, those guys are all PhD physicists, and they've worked, decades on it. And I'm just kind of taking it and I just kind of morphed it a little bit and saying, okay, well, if it happened in planets in collision based on Velikovsky's work and the scarring of, they apply it to Mars and all kinds of things. I'm just saying, okay, well, if it happened there, then it must have happened here. And all I've done is just turn around and look backwards. That's all I'm doing. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah.
When you're seeing if you follow these same patterns are just everywhere. And was the distance between those two places about 43 miles again, or whatever?
Oh yeah, exactly. This one between Rome this is 40 miles. Yeah, 39.4 miles, 9 miles.
So it seems like there's almost a pattern there as well, where it's about 43 miles, give or take. I mean, that was to the center of each as well. I wonder what that is all about.
Yeah, this is it, right? It's if you do the dimensions on it. So there's Vatican City's in the middle, and we've heard the stories, like I said, about the blue snakes, chasing the people in the streets. They're running for their lives, and the blue serpents were running across the ground, and the stones were on fire. And it's because Vatican City was right between the two poles, and it would have been lit up like a Christmas tree. And it would have actually carved the coast. So there's a strike zone and an arch in the coast, strike zone, arch in the coast, getting right down the whole thing. There's a strike zone, arch in the coast, and you can actually measure them. Right, you go to the north, there's another strike zone, arch in the coast. So not only would have the city been lit up instantly, the whole, they would have seen probably the ocean just disappear for a second and then come all sloshing back in.
See, this is the bit where I'm kind of thinking like this is kind of like evidence of creation in terms of this is how the land masses were created. But then I remind myself about how improbable this is in terms of the result of like natural disaster. In terms like evolution is supposed to be totally random, and that would have to be argued to be totally random. Yet it looks orchestrated. It looks as though it's been someone sat there and thought, right, I'll have a nice couple of coves along here. It's like SimCity. You're looking down on it from the SimCity world point of view. And it's clearly, for me, it's clear indications that someone at some point was doing this somehow. It doesn't look like it's the result of randomness and a cosmic explosion just happened to shape the coastlines. It's madness.
Chris is showing us this at the moment, but he found some stuff where they're wearing headdresses which look like their hats look like the sky. I wondered if he wants to finish this, and then maybe he can, if he didn't mind just showing that bit. So that's maybe explaining a bit more. He's joined us. Hello, Gary.
Hi, everyone hear me?
Yeah, maybe if I'll dig that up, and maybe if RTs can grab those pictures of the temples that are out in the middle of the desert that are 300 or 400 kilometers from where they started. And I'll open up another thing here and show you some other stuff.
Yeah, I'm going to dig up those pics.
Thank you. Anyway, yes, Gary, we can hear you, but we're sort of in the middle of talking about something now.
No, you crack on. I'll just listen.
Okay, we've got artists, Chris, John the Morgile, we've got Ceres, Patricia, Anthony Riley, and Judith.
Hi, everyone.
Gary, John.
Hey, Gary.
Hey, Gary.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I'll let you carry on and I'll listen.
So whilst he's looking up that information and photos that he's referring to, I don't know if you've come across it, John, but you know the deserts of the world, like the Sahara and the Gobi Desert. I think that them deserts that we now consider to be barren and dry were at one time the seabeds, and the oceans were in a totally different position, because there's evidence of underground cities that are under a lot of water. That really, where's the water come from? And it's as if, I don't know if you've seen the tectonic plate, what's it called, the displacement, the tectonic plate crustal displacement theory or whatever it is, where everything shifts around and basically up becomes down and down becomes up. There's a lot of evidence that the stuff that shouldn't be in places that have been built in places that really shouldn't be built in places where you wouldn't build them. For example, you wouldn't build a civilization at the top of mountains. In the Peruvian mountains, nobody would ever build like civilizations up mountains unless the mountains were on the floor or the waters were right up there, and that was actually the coast at some point. And the deserts that we now consider to be bone dry, if you look at, for example, the landing site where the Titanic or the Olympic, whichever, hit the deck underneath the Atlantic, it looks just like the surface of the desert. And it makes me wonder whether the deserts were once the seabeds, and the seabeds that are now covered with water were once life, and everything's been switched upside down for some kind of SimCity kind of weirdness that's gone on.
Well, based on what Chris is saying, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I'm familiar. I've always wondered, especially fairly recently, they discovered, I think, off of the coast of China, really quite massive undersea city that's well under the sea level. And if the Earth has a natural ability to sort of take chunks of stuff and displace it, it makes a lot of sense why you'd find like you said, like Machu Picchu cities on the tops of mountains and other cities underwater. It's like, how do you build a city under sea level? And right, so yeah, pretty cool to think about. And when you look at all of this stuff through the lens of flat Earth and the lens of electric universe, it does make it just makes a whole lot more sense. And this is stuff that you can repeat in a lab. This is stuff that you can do scaled down demonstrations of. It's not just theoretical. So I like it much better.
And I buy into the concept that once you realize that we don't live on a spinning ball that's not orbiting the sun, and the sun itself is not orbiting the center of the galaxy, once you realize that that's not the reality that we live in, it's kind of anything goes at that point, because you can look at evidences in any different light and none of it's right or wrong. It's totally down to how you see it, but nothing's right or wrong. So it's like the rule book's out the window, anything goes. And it's interesting that there's so many different things out there that we now put our eyes on stuff and think, oh my God, I've never seen it from that perspective. I mean, even recently, the clouds, when you look at the clouds going down to the horizon, I mean, we've had quite a few days of miserable weather in the UK, and the clouds, we've had the clouds that are flat bottomed, and it looks like all the clouds are sat on a buoyant layer of air. But when you look down towards the horizon and you see all the flat bottom clouds going in a straight line, there's no evidence of any curvature of the earth. Yet if we were living on a curved earth and it's supposed to be as curved as what Soundly's Pontchartrain videos show, then you would see the clouds following the contour of the claims on the curvature. Yet we don't see any evidence of anything other than perfectly straightness. And it's like, oh my God, I'd never even seen the clouds before. But it's interesting now when you have different eyes on stuff, how you see things in a totally different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree, man. Well said.
What are we looking at now then? Who are we looking at? Chris or artists?
Oh, artists, he pulled up the pictures I asked him to pull up there.
Okay, then.
He had found these, and I was just amazed by them because, obviously, where's the rest of the temple? It's been just picked up and gone, and this is planted out in the middle of the desert, 300 kilometers from where it started.
Do you know where the other part of the temple is?
Yeah.
Artists figured it. Yeah,
I have a couple of more, and so you can, I hope it works.
I mean, to be honest, what's also interesting, if you just go back to that image, that image there, that couldn't have fallen out the sky and landed there because it would have disintegrated into a pile of rubble. It must have landed there as a result of water allowing it to softly hit the floor, because that stone, it's quite fragile, it's strong, but you don't need...
It came a bit like through a hurricane.
Yeah, but I would have expected something with such weight behind it to, even like a few centimeters off the floor, you could drop that and it'll put a huge crack right the way down the middle. That must have been placed there by water, right?
Well, if it had enough negative charge and it would have been supported by the electric field, it just would have kind of floated in there. Like the negative field would actually levitate it, right? That's what's holding the moon up, right? So you can see underneath it was obviously, it just blows my mind, right? Yeah. I look at it and you have to giggle about the scale of it, right? Like, wow.
You can see a little boy sitting down.
I can just imagine a couple of cars being parked outside and falling down the hole like Superman style, where it fell down that crack when Lois Lane was in that car. That's the image that I have there on that one.
Oh, well, then he had to make the world spin backwards to bring time back.
Same thing with hurricanes, actually blowing buses and trucks up into the air, but that's purely through the electromagnetic field in there.
Yeah, the electromagnetic field creates anti-gravity effects, absolutely. Yeah.
And Chris, what do you make of that? I have some pictures of that probably petrified wood, but some detailed pictures. Maybe that's also interesting to inject in the.
Oh, is that from the petrified forests in the States?
Yeah. Yeah, but some close-up pictures, really close.
Yeah, it's actually fulgurite glass and mineral formations from the strikes. Yeah, it's not trees. Yeah.
Here you can.
One thing I know that Chris is going to show a bit more, but I really think that you should show the Morgile the bit about the moon. I think he would love that bit about the moon you were talking about.
Well, yeah, these are just a couple of pictures of the so you Chris can see. It's the wrong way.
Yeah, and you can tell by if you go back one there, you can clearly tell that the outside is iron, and then the silicates and glass are all distributed and create basically you create rubies on the inside of it because it just gets so hot in the electric field. It looks like bark, but that's because this outer edge was at one time buried in the clays and dirt, and that's just where the charge stopped. I looked at these in pretty good detail, and a friend of mine, Bradley Gillen, he actually lives in this area, and he's going to go out there and take some more pictures. But he's like, yeah, man, I see all these petrified trees, but where's the root? Right, they're all laying down, like there's no root. It's just chunks of glass, basically petrified or fulgurite.
So at the time that these were created, however they were created, I'm guessing that humans wouldn't be able to tolerate that kind of environment at all.
Oh, they could have, yeah. I mean, it could have been quite rich, really. There could have been a time when there wasn't any sun at all, and the sky just glowed with a nice pink, perfectly pink grow-like plasma that glowed for thousands of years with a rich, lush vegetation. It would have been a great growing system.
Well, that would then, in theory, allow the possibility that the dinosaurs might have lived, because obviously the dinosaurs couldn't spend more than 24 hours a day eating, and there's only so many hours in the day, unless the quality of the food that they were eating was far better than what they're eating now. So, I mean, I don't buy into the dinosaurs idea on that basis, but if there was better food...
Yeah, I don't buy into the dinosaurs to a certain degree. I do buy into the fact that, we do have evidence that in the past things were a lot bigger than they are now. We got the ferns that were 20 feet high. We got the mushrooms that were 30 feet high. We got
and it wasn't just about like the food was better or any one thing. It seems like it was a combination of things. Like back when things got very giant, like there were sharks that we know were giant, alligators and stuff that were giant. And I don't agree with the dinosaurs either, but things used to get a lot bigger and live a lot longer. And it was because of and this is also demonstrable, and we can show this in a lab that if you increase the magnetic field, increase the barometric pressure, increase the oxygen content, then living things will grow much larger and live much longer. And so it seems like there was a pretty massive worldwide, change in the charge, essentially.
Well, if that is true, then in theory the dinosaurs could have existed. Like, I'm not maybe not saying that they did, but if it was some kind of utopian environment, that definitely opens the doors to the possibility that big dinosaurs could have existed, because the nourishment might have been there if what you're saying is true here, which is crazy.
Yeah, they call them dinosaurs, right? But it's because we do have evidence of like John was saying, there's evidence of 4-foot wingspan dragonflies and insects, right? And that's it's clear that that's what it was. But they say it was a completely dinosaur type of environment, and then everything went extinct. Well, I don't buy that. I buy into the fact that it was at one time much bigger, cataclysmic event. Some of it survived, and then it just got smaller in the next generation because it was under more pressure environmentally. The environment changed a little bit, less oxygen, etc., or even carbon monoxide. Because I know Crocodiles, I think, are actually only have one lung because at one time they were developed to actually breathe CO2, right? They didn't even breathe oxygen. They were cold-blooded CO2 breathing creatures, right? But they were huge. So I think what we call dinosaurs of the past is like the chicken of today, and the crocodiles of today were at one time dinosaurs of the past. They never went extinct, right?
Let me run something by you real quick, Chris, because fish breathe underwater, we breathe air. But if you listen to the like Kundalini yoga masters, they will tell you. Well, let me start this way. If you ask a medical doctor, a modern medical doctor, where does the body's electric charge come from? They say that the heart is essentially a generator, and I think to me that's ridiculous, because when did pumping liquid through meat become a electric generator? And so, but if you look at like what the Kundalini yogis are saying, and their traditions go back thousands of years, that when we breathe in air, we're actually taking in the static electric charge of the air and converting that. And so when you breathe in at sea level, the oxygen's about 21%. And when you exhale, the oxygen that you exhale is only about 17%. So you're not sapping that much oxygen out of the air. Plus, you're also breathing out oxygen in the form of carbon dioxide. And so, yes, we do need oxygen, but it seems like the reason that we breathe is more to gather the what they call it as prana, but it's basically to gather the static electric charge and convert that. And it actually gets pretty interesting when you look into it. Even they claim that the left nostril gives the air a negative charge, the right a positive charge. And they even say that the uvula, which, that thing that dangles in the back of your throat that anatomy doesn't have an answer for, they say that is a transformer. And there's a whole, it's not even a theory behind it. That's what they've been practicing for forever. And it makes a lot more sense that we harness the electricity from the air itself, much like a Tesla device, a free energy device would, rather than a meat pump generating electricity.
Yeah, it's a fascinating study. I've never tried it myself. I do have a couple of friends that are breatharians. Basically, that's what they call themselves, I believe, is breatharians. They live off their breath for the most part and consume very little food. I've never tried it. I do have some information on it, but fascinating, eh?
Yeah, indeed. I just thought I'd run that by you because, to me, like if electric universe applies to the Earth, I mean, what are we but an extension of the Earth? And so it would make sense that, we are basically free energy devices, more or less. And yeah, indeed, when you get to a certain level with Kundalini yoga, they don't have to eat. They don't even have to breathe. They can sit there in a meditative state, and they don't need really anything for sustenance. It's pretty wild.
That would be the way to go, wouldn't it? Absolutely, yeah. I'm going to show you the moon thing here that Karen was talking about here too, and that'll kind of finish up where I'm going to hit the final point of it. If we go way back in time here, what this picture here is not a photograph. I actually modeled this in a 3-dimensional Blender program using the particle physics. So I created essentially a mushroom cloud of plasma, and then I stacked to scale above the plane. I stacked Mars and Saturn and Jupiter, and then an electrostatic field in the plasma form above it, and then shone a light through it. And so this cross type of shape that you see is not, I didn't Photoshop that in there. That's actually what happens looking from the ground up through a huge plasma cloud. That's what you would see in the sky. This is the Milky Way in the background. And I noticed that if you look real close, you can just have to use your imagination a little bit, but you can see that it looks like a falcon. Here's the wings of the falcon and the two eyes with the beak, and kind of looks like a falcon, right? So now you think, oh, well, that looks awful Egyptian to me.
Looks more like a stealth bomber.
Or a stealth bomber. Yeah, you can do that too. Yeah. And I kind of related it to, well, there's the falcon symbolism with the red, this is Mars with the dome of the sky, the two eyes of the falcon, and you see how they would naturally tend to towards that, right, in their belief systems, with two rods being the charge points of the circuit, right? And this becomes a transformer connected with the sky. If you're going to handle high electricity, I mean, look what that is, right? It's the same thing we use today, the high polars, right? The high pole guys use that to trip the breakers on the high poles. It's an insulated pole with the ground on the bottom. So you don't kill yourself. And there's the waveform function in between, right? And this is your ohm symbol. And that's just a close-up of that circuit from below.
While we've got the stars on, I don't know if you're aware, John, but there's have you come across the idea that some of the stars don't reflect in water, but other stars do, and there doesn't appear to be a logical, straightforward explanation for it? Chris, would you show John those stars that what you were talking about the other day?
Yep, I get into that after this. Yeah,
I've never heard that, but it doesn't surprise me. And
yeah, well, I mean, just think about it. If you look at a body of water and look at the stars reflected in it, it appears that half of them, or at least half of them, maybe more, don't appear to reflect in water, and the other half do. And the question is, well, why would only some of them do it? And Chris has got a suggestion for it, which I think's amazing. And I think really, if that is what is explaining why only half the stars are reflected in water, it kind of makes an awful lot of sense when you consider that thunder. I mean, I don't want to piss on the parade, but thunder kind of gives you can hear echo. Thunder will echo if you get a loud enough clap of thunder and you're close enough to it, you can hear thunder echo, and that's echoing from something. So when Chris goes through it, just be thinking about the thunder, the clap of thunder echoing with what he's about to show, and then think, ooh, that's quite interesting, because I've never seen the stars explained in this way before, and I think it's fab. It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's interesting when you really start thinking outside the box, right? Literally. This is the similar type of image, right? You can see how that in this image, all I did was just rotate the sunlight, and you can see that because of the way it is cast, it creates this type of a butterfly type of image, or a swan. You can see this would be the white swan with the half moon symbolism from what's that?
Looks like a builder's bum.
A builder's bum, yeah, kind of. Yeah, the plumber's bum. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just think of that for a second there and hold that. So this is.
I just got that.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's the red eye with the beard type of shape, right? So this would be the beard coming down, and again you see that kind of happening right there. So in this one here, now you start to see, well, this is where the event was chronicled within religious practice and culture. You'll see that it's pretty clear to me that image, this type of image, if you saw it in the sky and wanted to honor it in a respectful and fearful way, would be, well, there's the red Mars in the center with the cross again, which is representing this back here in the headdress with the blue sky, the green grass. There's the arch and the stars in the heavens. This is the darkness of night, and there's the light of day, and there's the sun. And you can actually count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 planets. 7 planets. Each one of these, if you zoom in really close, you can see that each one has a different symbol for the 7 ages, 7 planets, and a huge plasma cloud. Right? And it's not just that culture, but it carries over from culture to culture. Here's the same story told again, just from a different perspective, different culture. Now there's the cross in the sky with the surrounding orbs, the white plasma, the green at the top. There's the blue sky underneath. There's the 2 eyes of the Milky Way. Instead of a falcon, we're seeing it as an owl, right? But it's the same story, in my opinion, worshipping as one would expect. Right? If it came along every so often and wiped out your entire culture, I think you would have some respect for it. Right?
Well, it's always seemed to me that the ancient cultures have tried to leave future generations sort of a breadcrumb trail, right? And it appears that the powers which ought not be are covering that up and destroying it, or maybe hoarding it, as opposed to heating it, right?
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to finish up here too, this is in the UK. This is actually around the area of Giant's Causeway.
Scotland.
This is a cave that's I don't remember the name of it exactly, but this should look familiar to you guys.
Scotland.
In Scotland, yeah.
Scotland.
You can see it has the perfect symmetry to it. So there's the charge went in and divided that perfect. What's interesting about this is it kind of shows that the columns were actually formed from the underneath up as the charge was coming through the water. Basalt, keyword is salt, right? And water. So the charge was in the water first and then worked its way up, basically consuming as it went until it reached the surface. But in this case, obviously the charge was separated and it didn't finish.
Can I just add, I think Giant Causeway is in Ireland.
Yeah, I was going to say it's not Scotland. It's off the west coast of Scotland, but it's technically Ireland.
Ireland, yeah.
Well, it makes more sense than giant trees that grew out of basalt and silica that were chopped down by supergiants. not too.
Yeah, I mean that is logical, right? After the cataclysmic event, and I can show you there's pictures, actually hand-drawn paintings and pictures from the 1600s when the locals went there and then took these that were actually loose and they numbered each side A, B, C, D, E, F, G and put numbers on these and just took little pieces and then built castles of them and stacked them vertically and made a perfect octagonal, barrier wall, precisionally cut. That's what you're told, right? It's precision machining. Well, just knock this down, break it in two and make yourself a castle. That's kind of what was going on in my opinion. In many cases, not all cases, but many cases, you take advantage of what you have.
Right. Yeah.
I always err on the side of, well, humans in general are just lazy, so we're going to do what's easier, right?
That's right.
Right.
Chris, show us the stars. If you
Stars, yeah. This I wanted to touch on this. This goes back to what RTs was saying about the mesa formation and the flat top. This is a dielectric plate in a lab with your two poles, which are charged, statically charged, and a plate underneath, physically separating sand and clays, and it creates this octagonal shape, which is your hexagonal and octagonal shape of the basalt. And you end up getting a flat, you get this distribution around the outside like we saw in the mountains, and then the river flows and a flat top. And so that was a negative. This is what the negative does. Creates a nice flat top, nice even particle distribution. Positive pole creates what we saw before, right? This would be more like your Sundance crater with a blast in the middle and an X shape and a star shape.
Which looks a lot like the moon craters.
Absolutely, yeah. And you'll see moon craters do the same thing. You'll get the ones that go down, right, and the ones that come up. So you get the lift. So the arc would hit here, but then it just vibrates all around it. And that's just a shock wave in the frequency range. And then, because this is what actually happened in this experiment, it starts just with the even layer of dust across the entire plate. And then in a fraction of a second, it just starts to suck it all in and creates this mound in the middle instantly. And this one here, you actually essentially replicated the face of Mars. It's like Mariners. So I think it's called whatever the scars on the face of Mars. Pretty good evidence. So different setup. This one I kind of imagine is this what, if you imagine this is the moon, right? And this is the Earth. Well, then now you know why there's craters on the moon and there's no angular meteor strike zones. If you look at the moon, there's not an angular strike or any evidence of skipping meteors that hit and then bounce and are left laying on the surface. It's all craters that hit perfectly at 90 degrees to the surface.
Yeah, when you got that picture there, just go back to that one picture that you just had on. That if the moon was a construct kind of like that, that also reminds me a lot of, do you remember when in school we did the Van de Graaff generator with the wand, and you held the wand and you moved it gradually closer, and then it'd arc and it'd go boom, and that's kind of exactly what we're looking at there. It looks just like the Van de Graaff.
Yep, exactly same thing. You get the arc strike between the two poles here. High voltage, extremely high voltage.
I wonder if the Earth and the moon had a relationship like that at some point, or does now.
Oh yeah, we do. Sure we do, yeah. In what I'm looking at is the oceans are dielectric, so the actual magnetic field is coming from the surface of the Earth going up to the moon and actually keeping it held up in its field because it's in a cold level. So you think of the moon as being a very cold aluminum titanium type of object that's now a superconductor because it's in a vacuum and it's extremely cold and our magnetic field is actually levitating it and holding it up there. So what happens is,
and by the way, I would just mention, not to interrupt you, but that is also demonstrable and repeatable in a lab. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. We've seen that video, right, when you have the quantum locking and it goes around on a track with liquid nitrogen on it. Well, it's the same thing, right? Yeah. And so what happens is, if you think of it as a circuit, so there's a pre-existing magnetic field and it's locked. So the moon's locked into the scalar waves, which are Birkeland currents and the Meissner effect. So they're basically straight lines, right? So it's kind of locked into its path. But as it moves, it's interfering with the other side of the pole, which is your sinusoidal waves, right? And they're going in a sine wave, but it's cutting them. So when it cuts them, it interrupts the current phase and causes the oceans to ebb and flow, rise and fall, tides go, waters flow. And we know for a fact that only saltwater, the oceans, are the only ones that experience a tide. Like the Great Lakes, there's no tides in the Great Lakes, right? And they're inland oceans, right? They're huge, but they experience no tidal effect, right? There's not an ocean, there's not a river anywhere that reverses its flow or stops flowing or slows or ebbs or flows in any way, shape, or form as the moon passes over. Yeah. Even though they're connected to the ocean, it never happens, right? You never see an ocean start or a river start to turn backwards because the moon passed over, right? It's only the salt water. Another globe-busting thing, right?
Just real quick, Chris, you were talking about those hexagonal shapes. They are on the coast of England. Also, they are built a structure with that in near Australia on an island. I can show really quick. It's the island of it's the Mendol in the island of Conpai. It's near Australia. If you have Australia and you go just north and then a little bit to the east, you have those small islands over there. And what I found...
You mean in Micronesia area there with the temple there?
New Guinea.
I know there's some in Micronesia too. Yeah.
New Guinea.
Oh, yeah. New Guinea, Micronesia, yeah.
Yeah, and I can show you some pictures of there. That they built an ancient fortress that is supposedly thousands of years old.
Okay.
And
All right, let me finish these last 3 pictures here, explain the actual electrical process, and then you take it from there, and I'll take a quick break.
Chris,
Don't forget about the stars.
Sorry, Anthony.
Don't forget about the stars.
Yeah, Chris, I just wondered whether last night you showed us Moon. I really think John would like to see that, as well as artist stuff.
Which part?
The bit we did last night on the moon.
Yeah, the pictures of the moon. Yeah.
Would you do that?
Yeah, we'll try to get to that. Sure. So I got 3 more pictures here. Let me get through these 3 pictures, and I'm going to let artist take it.
Sorry.
I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'll come back to that. So this is what happens this is the stacking sphere problem, right? When you have spheres, you pack them like balls. What happens in the electric field is you end up with a positive and negative, but it's a slightly different distribution. So you end up creating this hexagonal shape. And if you look at it, so this is just from a top-down plane view. So you'll end up with hexagons, squares, and we've seen magnetite will actually form a beautiful little square in crystals, like amazingly perfect. And this would be like a square crystal formation. That's just because of the charge distribution. So then you have to kind of imagine that as a 3-dimensional object, which is why you get a portion that's now a crystal, perfect hexagonal. And then as the electricity changes its waveform, like so it's going out and in, as it climbs the column, differential in stress. So then you go from hex to the triangle, which is, the inverted phase, as it crosses 0 point in the center. And that's why you'll see that those columns of basalt tend to go up, and then they fracture, go up, fracture, go up, fracture. So they kind of stack. It's almost like someone takes a hexagonal thing and just stacks them like a tower of stacked perfect on top of each other. And the other thing that adds to that process is when the initial arc strike happens, everything gets heated really fast and rapidly. And because it's also vibrating, this is like what this is cornstarch on a vibrating table, and it tends to create the same type of distribution. It's not perfect, but it gives you a bit of an idea, because you have to kind of put 2 and 2 together and say, okay, well, the heat liquefies everything. It makes it all like it's firstly particles and crystals. Then it gets hot. It remains liquid. When it's a liquid, it starts to take on the electromagnetic field. And then as it starts to cool, it becomes magnetic. And we know that when you take a compass to some of these sacred sites, there's videos online you look at. The guys will go up and they'll hold the compass to the stone, and you can see, oh, well, this is polarized, right, by some mysterious alien force. Well, it's just because it was at one time electrified and liquefied, and it took on the charge at the time, right? So you can actually tell where it was pointed right at the time. So that's what happened. Not big trees.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense than big
like
trees.
Nope.
Right. Yep. This goes back to what we were saying, because we do have some evidence of large fauna in the past, but it's not what we think it is. This is obviously a mushroom stalk of some type, 6 feet high. So there's a line. That's the line where I draw. I say, okay, well, it was this big, and we know that it was this large and stuff. But after that, it's natural processes and inorganic mountains. Yeah, so this is a petrified tree.
Wow, is that? Oh, okay. I'm seeing that stump. Yeah, that's obviously a tree, right?
Yeah,
that's obviously not.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Like this is an actual petrified tree, right? It's a redwood tree in a redwood forest, and it's an old tree. But this is not, right? So that's the end. I'm going to stop right there. I'll go take a break.
Man. Yeah. Well said. Well done. I don't know what else to say. I mean, I sort of interrupted you plenty and responded as we went. So you've got me hooked. I'm with you.
I said you could ask questions, didn't I, John? I mean, we've watched this.
I'm kidding.
A few times now, all of us here. Maybe Gary hasn't, but Anthony, Series, Patricia, we've all been watching this for a few weeks now, as Chris has been putting this together. But the next bit, you're going to go even more wow when he comes back. But anyway, it's wow to artists now.
Yeah, well, basically what Chris told.
Thanks. I'm glad you appreciate it. Yeah. I'll be back in a few minutes.
Yeah. I love your work, Chris. Really do. Yeah. Well, what Chris was basically telling about this hexagonal shapes, they were all around the coast, and this is some islands near Australia. They are just above it in the north, a couple of hundreds of kilometers, near Australia. Basically, you have some small island range, and just above that you have really small islands, and there you can see those hexagonal shapes are used with building and construction. All of them are somewhat or close to a hexagonal shape. You can also see again on the bottom, like most of the time, those stones are the biggest. And this was built on a coral reef. So the floor of this is only coral reef. And they And these stones are in that location on that island. There are none of these stones whatsoever. National Geographic did on the History Channel. They did a subject about this, and they found those stones on a small island near that. I don't know exactly the name of that island, but it's almost 25 kilometers or more away. And they retracted the stones from that coastline and tried to ship them with possibly the ships they had in that time to this location, and it can't be done because all the boats sank. So they had a different type of technology of cutting out these stones from those coastlines everywhere and transporting them to this structure. So this is very interesting that happened.
Well, and I guess they would claim that they hewn solid rocks out of the walls with copper tools, right?
I can show you some other pictures. My headphones just went dead for a moment.
What's interesting about that picture is see that tree that randomly appears in the middle of like zero nourishment. I had a tree just like that growing under my driveway. I had to cut it out. There was nothing for it to grow in, and it was like this. It was the trunk or the main part of it was kind of as wide as your wrist, and it was growing into nothing. It's like, how can you even get nutrition from a concrete driveway that you found a crack to grow into? Oh, it was mad.
Indeed, and this is built on a coral reef, and I have some more pictures. You can see it's also fallen down, but they used those hexagonal blocks just to build this structure alone on this coral reef, and nobody knows why they built it. Nobody knows what purpose of it was, and it's basically a mystery. This is the location. This is basically, you can see the red of the coral surrounding it, and it's called Mandol. This is zoomed out a bit so you can see where it's at. It's on the island of Pohnpei. It is where they built this structure with this hexagonal stones. Most of them are perfectly that shape. Some of them maybe are broken off, but most of them are perfectly like that. And this is a drawing what they've put together, what it possibly had looked like back in the day.
And so that's all underwater now, obviously.
Some of it is, and the pictures that I showed are above water, but indeed some of the structures are underwater or just sticking out on the surface. It's just totally mystery. National Geographic went to this site and tried to explain why this was built, but nobody has. It was all guesswork, and the age of this construction is supposedly thousands of years old, but it's just a wild guess.
Right. Yeah. I mean, how could you possibly date something like that?
Yeah, you can date the stone, but if you date the stone, you don't. Stones are not. You can't carbon date stones. It's very hard, and if you could do that in some kind of way, you end up with the time of that those stones were formed, and not with the time of the construction of the actual site. So
exactly, and then how could you verify it? Because we've only been studying carbon dating for what, maybe a century at the very most, right? Not even a century, and to say that we know what will happen to carbon-14 over a million years is just ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's also with the pyramid, they did some carbon dating on the pyramids. And you always get in books an estimate about how old they are, and they're roughly saying how old they are, but they leave a leverage for almost thousands of years. So they say, yeah, this structure was about 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000 or 2,000 years old.
That's because they don't know. So they make it that age because they don't know.
No,
so everything will be today of a certain 4,500 years ago, whatever it is. They'll pick an age, but nobody knows.
Nobody knows, and they try to tell about the construction and how it is constructed. So supposedly it was predating that civilization, but it's all wild guesses.
Sounds like this whole thing we're in, doesn't it, really?
Mm-hmm. Also, this site is again very hard to find. They make it as hard as possible to find any pictures of this. So they try to make this kind of old structures that are not commonly known as hard to find as possible. And for Sunday, I have also a structure that is also very interesting for the Sunday talk about the ancient structures. And that is in Germany, and that will even blow your mind further. You see that those structures, you will probably say, how in the world could it has ever been built as such a large scale? And it's in Germany, so it was a little bit easier to read all the scriptures and interesting views of everybody about it. But I will save that for Sunday, so I can show you maybe one picture just to make everybody curious.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see at least one.
Just a second, I have to really see where that picture.
Yeah, on Sunday, John, we have a pyramid talk. We do pyramid talk with this guy called Angel, which is one of Anthony's friends.
Okay.
We've been doing about 3 weeks now, I think, of pyramid talks on Sunday.
Yeah, it's a great topic, and that there's every time that the pyramids get brought up, people say that the Great Pyramids were poured, like sort of like cement, but different. But there's so many other ancient sites that were not poured, even pyramidal sites like in South America that were obviously not poured. They were stacked blocks, and you have like Pumapunku and Machu Picchu and just all over the world. I have just all these ancient pyramidal sites. So yeah, you could probably do that on, every Sunday forever and not cover all of it.
Yeah, and just finding
That you could, yeah.
I'm just finding the picture.
After he's found this picture, would you show John the moon, please?
Sure. I'll pop it up. I just popped it up there so you can have a look at it.
Okay. We do artist picture first.
I think he's still looking for it.
Got it.
You got it? Okay.
It's basically, I'll show, because you're such a nice person, I'll show a couple. Just for you.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Hey, you loved here, John. You loved here.
This is basically the stones. And this is a column with some very straight cutout. And they know nothing about this. It's all wild guesses. You can see this is machine tooled, very clear. You can enlarge it a bit. You can see machine marks on it.
But to be honest, though, them marks on there are consistent with the marks that you see in the mines from I can't remember what the name of the mines are called, but where they use the stronger acidic solution to carve out the lintels in the massive rocks that they use for the pyramids. They're not the base stones or the capstones or any of the sandstones, but the lintels for the archways. Them marks they're very similar to the marks that they sculpted or like scooped out the stone from them quarries. I've seen these lines before.
Oh yeah, just like in Peru and Bolivia. They scooped it out with ice cream scooper.
Yeah, it looks very, very similar. Yeah. I understand it was a strong acidic solution that they used, or some incredible heat.
Again, you can see
it could be like a what does it call it? Where it's a vibrational thing, or even like a liquid.
Yeah.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for. What? Say that again.
Like an air hammer chipper, like an ultrasonic air hammer chipper. We use those in the mines today.
Yeah, it seems like it would be easier to cut through stone, like to scoop it out like that was something that was sonic, or vibratory, vibrational. I mean, maybe acidic, but wouldn't acidic get kind of messy? You know what I mean?
And that's kind of what, if you look at that cut there, you can see where the squares are in the top, where they would have driven the wedges. So you make a saw cut, like a very fine saw cut, and then you dig into it with the chisels to make your holes, and then you drive wedges in the top, and then the stone fractures along those lines. So you can kind of see that this one was in progress, when it was destroyed or knocked down or whatever. They never finished it, whatever it is, half done.
Yeah.
They were going to make a set of stairs, never finished, right? Yeah. I sometimes tell the story. We had a stone on a mine site I was on, and it was huge. It was similar. Well, that's a good picture there. Similar idea, like the back in the picture there, RTs. If you go back one, kind of tell the story, but we couldn't figure out how to move it. So what we ended up doing was we found a reasonably good fracture zone in this giant boulder and drilled holes through it. And then what we did, since we were in the north, is we filled the holes with hot water, and then plugged it with mortar and bolted plates on it to hold it all in place. So we drilled holes, tapped it, put plates around it, filled it with water, and then we just sat back and waited 24 hours until the water froze and popped that rock like it wasn't even there, right along that crack line. Just poof, that was it. So we let the water do the work.
Yeah, that's a pretty smart way to do it. But yeah, it makes sense. And I've seen similar I guess you could say, theories of cutting tools that they could have used to cut such, high density, and heavy stones. Liquid is one good way that makes a lot of sense, and also vibratory. Who knows? We're really guessing, but yeah, you seem to. I mean, if you've got practical experience with it, certainly people could have figured that out before.
Yeah, exactly.
Go to sleep.
Yeah, never underestimate, simple tools with a smart mind. As my grandfather used to say, there's a good example, right? They've cut into that to start the crack, and then they just bust it from there and then finish it off. Yeah.
Doesn't it seem like a really labor-intensive method, though? Yeah, you could do it once, twice, but you wouldn't want to create a pyramid cutting rocks like that way, would you? Because you'd be there for thousands of years.
Well, the pyramids are a different story altogether, right? I think the majority of them are geopolymer type of concrete stones that were poured. So those are obviously getting ready for your wedges, right? You're getting ready to split that rock. So that's a different process. But it's a bit of both, right? Some of them, like John was saying, some are poured, some are not, some are natural, some were actually carved out of solid rock. It's all of the above, right? They were masters at their craft.
Yeah, definitely. And it seems like, they weren't stupid either. And like you said, I mean, lazy is sometimes very smart, although lazy and shortcuts can get you into trouble. But at the same time, if you've got something that, if you have an idea in mind, you go and find the site that where nature has done most of the work for you already, and then mold that to your liking, as opposed to trying to start from scratch with everything.
Just something radical. We have to also factor in external intervention, which I know is a little bit of way out there.
Say again, Gary. I didn't quite catch what you said.
The theory about outside of the Archons, the land, the other side of Antarctica. You just don't know what's out there. If we believe that there is an out there, then was there external intervention? Because there's so many theories on where we live.
Yeah, it's pure speculation. What's beyond? Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking, we're trying to get it to fit with what we know, or limited amount we know. But I was talking to somebody the other day, and I can't think it was, and they were talking about they think that life is on a 10,000 year cycle. I don't think anyone else has heard that, and it's interesting, if that is possible, and also what happens on each transition, if that is a concept that's plausible.
That's kind of where I'm ended up with all my research too. Is it's definitely a cyclical type of thing, and with each transition, it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. It fractalizes because the energy just redistributed in an entropic type of distribution system, and with every event, the next generation is just smaller, and which makes sense to me. Why we see megalithic structures in the past that we can't duplicate today is because we're no longer 24 feet tall, right? And where those people are, right? And I put a limit on it, right? I know. If we look at some of the ones that were found in the 1800s, and there's evidence of human skeletons that were 12 to 14 feet tall, right? And if you look at the glyphs in Egypt, some of those guys are obviously picking up 2 stones at once with a pole across their shoulders. So they would have had to have been able to lift at least 2,400 pounds per man, right? As a laborer, lifting 2,400 pounds is a big guy, right? And I kind of put the top at about 20 feet would be probably the maximum I've seen any evidence of that may have existed. Beyond that, the whole giants that are 300-400 feet tall, I don't go that far with it at all. But I keep it, organic, and around 20 feet is about the max that I've seen. But still, that's huge, right? It is no wonder they built giant structures, because you build to the size that you are, right? And they could have traveled long. They could have traveled long distances. How fast could a man that's 25 feet tall run, right? 60, 80 kilometers an hour, right? Think about it, right? With each step, he's covering 100 feet, right? If he's a full bore run, he's trucking along, right? 100 kilometers an hour, right?
No doubt. And you'd think that they would probably be. It seems like they would be intelligent as well, right? Because it's not like we're taught evolution as sort of the rule, but it seems like entropy is something that we are experiencing as opposed to evolution. And so I tend to think that if there is evidence for these giants, even giant people, humanoids, whatever, that they were probably like wicked smart, not monkeys.
Yeah, absolutely. And entropy is where I go with it, right? I've been looking hard. I mean, trust me, I've looked hard. I've read the journals on, prokaryotic type of DNA sequencing and everything, and the eukaryotic tree of DNA going back as far as I could find evidence for. And I haven't found any evidence of any transformation in any species across the board from a bacteria to human that actually gets more complex over time, right? It's always a reduction in size and complexity, but it's just the energy is just distributed over a wider swath, right? Because we can't create nor destroy it, but it just becomes distributed. It dilutes. So we devolve, we don't evolve.
I was going to say, shouldn't we then call it devolution rather than evolution?
Yeah, it should be devolution, not evolution. Absolutely. Yeah. And trees do the same thing, right? Trees don't grow as big as they used to. There's no trees anywhere around that are more than 400 or 500 years old. I mean, there's a few. But obviously, there was a cyclical event that brought in 20, 30 feet of mud into northern Russia and covered St. Petersburg 2 stories deep, right? That happened within the last 400 years, roughly, right? So it's been a cyclical, smaller flood, but same type of event, just smaller scale. Yeah.
Stars.
I guess in that sense, we're a bunch of devils, right? We're devolving. Yeah. I think about it that way.
Chris, I've got your picture up of the moon. I've got your pictures up of the moon because that's what
the moon thing. Yeah. Okay.
And the stars. Don't forget the star reflections.
Stars.
Burger.
The beef burger. Let me go with this one here first. So I got some amateur astronomer friends, as well as Dave Marsh has been sending some pictures through, and he sent some to Mike Helmick. Mike did some photoshopping on them, and he sent them to me. So the pictures are a combination of Dave Marsh's photographs, originals, and Bradley Gillen's photographs, and Mike Helmick helped me up with this stuff. And what we have is...
Yeah, I think I know Mike.
Yeah, and this is what I had shown before here was the... you can see it's more of a French curve, so it's obviously not a sphere. The light's being refracted, so the backlit side appears to be smaller than the lit side, giving that offset in scale. And that tells me it's a crystal lattice type of refraction, so it's actually magnifying the light, and it's only coming through part of the object. This is an original picture. This is the original before we enhanced the chroma key on it. And Brad sent me this. He actually did the chroma key on this to amplify the actual light so we can see what's going on. And I thought this was a great example of, you can see how it's between the original and the enhanced version. You can see it's like self-reflective, like you're actually looking through it. And this is clearly the shadow line. And you'll notice when you reverse negative that, the shadow line is where you'll see the detail in the craters, and then the front side will appear flat. So that's telling me that it's becoming polarized as the light gets absorbed by the object and re-emitted through it, back up through it in reverse. The shadows is disappearing on the front side, and you're just getting shadows on that. Again, in a French curve, so it's not a perfect sphere. It definitely has a cookie-type shape that Karen likes to refer to it as the chocolate chip cookie.
It looks pretty good. I'm so hungry. I would probably eat it right now.
Yeah.
I passed one over to Ceres yesterday. I don't know if Ceres can get it up. It definitely looks like a chocolate chip cookie. Ceres?
Yeah. This one was interesting. I don't know if I get the other picture, but I wanted to show you this one too. Maybe I'll come back to that one here. That's the hand. Let me zoom out of this one a little bit so you can see what's going on. So here we have the straight shadow line on the surface, the black side or the dark side. But what was most interesting about this, when we changed the curves on it, Mike did some scaling on the curves and whatnot. You'll see that this crater here is the object and appearing on the back in a negative. This crater here is being projected through the back and appearing some like a perfect match. This one here, I'll zoom in on it a little bit. So this little dark spot is a negative. So you can see how this crater here creates like a dark. And this one here looks like it's a void, and the light's going through it and illuminating in the backside, just the reverse.
Huh.
And then this shape here is being duplicated in the back. Perfect. All right. You can't deny that section is a double image thickness.
Huh, yeah.
Pretty solid evidence that the moon, we're actually looking through it and seeing both sides at the same time, which would explain why two people north, south, east, west, when they look at the moon, they see pretty much the same image, just reversed from their perspective.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and because that's why in the heliocentric theory they place the moon so far away, because we always see the same perspective of it. Not even getting into tidal locking or whatever, but yeah, I mean, it makes sense that on a flat Earth, we know that the moon is much closer than we're led to believe. But if it's not a physical spherical object, then it doesn't have to obey the laws of geometry and physics that we know so well down here on the physical dielectric plane.
John, can I just say that I sent you my chocolate chip cookie moon pictures to your Facebook Messenger, so just look at them after the hangout. But obviously they're slightly saturated because I've used the colours on the phone to change them, because I could see that thing there, but I needed it a bit brighter. But the colours are so dark, I couldn't get it any lighter than that. But it looks like a chocolate chip cookie. Anyway, it's on your Messenger.
Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks.
Yes, please.
And now we've
This
got the
rendering is this. There's the beef burger. Yeah, this is the beef burger shot. We'll name the beef burger. Interesting because when it was enhanced, you could see that there's a polarized outside field. This would be the terminator line. It's being backlit on this side, and this art is telling me that the light's being polarized and kind of split in a split cone type of effect, which would kind of tell me why that the refraction you see from the moon is different than the sun at you in more of a straight line.
You know, it's really funny that you bring that up, because I was looking at it was a very low lit moon, like maybe 3 or 5% crescent moon, and with my naked eye, and I have a really, really good vision, but with my naked eye, I could see 2 instances of the crescent moon, like almost overlaid on one on top of the other, and that's something that you don't notice until you're really looking for it, but it was very clear to me, and our eyes are just taking in basically light, energy, whatever that even is, and it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, that it's maybe some sort of a crystalline substance, or like you said, a superconductor, very probably cold, like in a cryostasis, so that it doesn't, perhaps their time may have to do, or perhaps time may be somehow connected with temperature, just how density and buoyancy is affected by temperature, pressure is affected by temperature, and vice versa. Perhaps at the levels that the moon is at, it's super cooled, there's no time that is not going to affect the moon as it may affect things down here. Does that make sense? Or am I going way off the deep end here?
John, can I just
absolutely
add something that you just said about what our eyes can take in? Do you think that's actually just made me think that there's we obviously can only see in certain wavelength, the frequency, and I just wonder that there's so much that, for all we know, the actual sun and moon could even be connected by a big rod being emitted. We can't see it. So do you think there's a possibility that the wavelengths that are out there, so basically if we can see everything, then we'd be absolutely shocked about what's out there, because we're only seeing literally only 1 or 2%?
I think that's very possible, and I don't even think we know what the entire spectrum really is, and I think that once they figure out the entire spectrum, then there's your grand unified theory, in a different sense that even physical matter, liquid is vibrating at a different level, basalt wood is vibrating at another level, and then limestone is vibrating at another level, frequency, and it just seems like it makes a lot of sense to me. Again, going back to what I said in the very beginning of the show, is what Tesla has always stuck with me. If you want the key to everything, basically look into vibration and energy. And so, it makes a lot of sense to me that, even right now, we all have Wi-Fi signals and radio frequency signals and different spectrum things that we don't see or hear, but it's all around us. So, we're more or less blind and deaf to the majority of the entire spectrum. And I'm convinced that we really don't know what the entire spectrum is in its fullest sense. So, yeah. If
I can just add, I just think that the authorities, whoever they are exploiting that. I think that they are, with their technology and whatever, that they're seeing, even though it may only be, for instance, they may only be saying 3 or 4%, and we're only seeing 1 or 2%, and they're nowhere near full spectrum. But if they're seeing even just one bit more than we are, then they can use that against us, or use it to their advantage.
Yeah, and they do.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. That's a whole other hangout. I could go on for an hour on that. That's a whole other hangout.
Well, just look at the tactical military advantage for having night vision. If you're fighting at night against an enemy that doesn't have night vision, just that gives you just such an overwhelming advantage. Just think of what little things that they could use against us to get that sort of advantage. And they definitely would, whoever they are.
Yeah. Well, we're then you're talking scalar wave applications relative to 9/11 and so forth. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Indeed.
Totally agree. But we should plan a hangout for that, because that'd be a long discussion.
I must admit, Karen, I would like to be involved in that, because I think that'd be really fascinating. So I'll put my name down now.
What have you done, Chris? You've made another hangout. You have to come back, John the Morgile.
Yeah, and I get a bit of first-hand information on that too, as being a former employee of one of the companies that was involved in that. So
Well, I think it'd be.
I could talk to that.
I think that's definitely got to be a hangout, isn't it?
Kind of discreetly, but
Thing is, though, Chris, how many other things are you into that we're not aware of yet? I mean, you seem to have your fingers in lots of pies. You're a clever man.
Clever man.
yeah, lots of irons in the
does
fire.
really
Yeah.
well, John. He writes songs. He draws.
Well, can I just say that I'm glad that I'm on the hangout, so I can dumb it down, so we can get more of an average. Because if not, then there'll be too many people that are on the hangout that's too clever. So I'm happy to do my bit to come across as Mr. Average.
Oh man, if you're awake to flat Earth, I really think it sort of tunes you to another frequency. I mean, it really does, and just so many things make sense. And if you have specialties and things, and you've been studying and applying whatever, it puts things at a whole nother perspective. And this is what I've really sort of been waiting for. Here lately, it's just so many new things come out every day, and I may feel just partially responsible, even if I just help wake up one or two people, whatever. To me, that's why I've done what I've done in the face of ridicule and threats and shillery and trolls, and they're such an echo chamber with the trolls that I think they've actually done more good for the truth than they have for trying to keep people stupid about it. But yeah, man, it's I don't think that anybody that's awake to flat Earth is stupid or dumbed down at all. I think that we're all sort of vibrating on another level than the rest of the people who are still sleeping in the pink goo in the Matrix, right?
Can I just add, John, the thing that I find the not most bizarre, but it does make me smile a little bit, is that 2 years ago I was massively into, and I had said this a few times on the Hangout, I was massively into aliens. If I saw a documentary or any mention about aliens, I'd love to talk about it, I'd love to hear about it. And now I would not even give it half a second of my time. I just literally just detest the whole. It's funny how it's not because somebody else has said it and brainwashed me, or somebody says something, I think, oh yeah, I agree. It
doesn't resonate with you anymore, does it, Gary?
But the thing is, where it actually, I wouldn't say it took over my life, because it didn't, but I loved the subject. I now hate the subject. I can't go anywhere near it, to the point that it actually almost makes me want to. I'd rather be sick than talk about alien life, even though I'm talking about it now, ironically, but I'm talking about it in a derogatory way, really, because I just can't believe. I mean, I was an absolute evolutionist and loved everything about aliens. Now I'm now thinking, yes, there's definitely a creator. I don't know what that creator is, and I will say that, but aliens is just an alien subject to me now.
Well, I was the same way, man, for years and years and years, actually. Really, my whole life, I've always thought that the topic was fascinating. And I think that, I don't know, it could be a bait and switch. You have the Roswell thing, and you do have, I've seen UFOs, and that's not crazy to say. It's just an unidentified flying object, but it's a weaponized term. But of course, I was very much into the whole Ancient Aliens theory and the series. And I read Chariots of the Gods. Gosh, I must have been I wasn't even 10 years old. And I've been into that theory my whole life. But, I agree. It's not interesting to me anymore. But at the same time, I don't necessarily think that we can rule it out. And this is where I stand on it, because, if you think about it, man, in the heliocentric theory, if there are, just assuming there's aliens out there, they'd never find us. And if they did find us, they could never get here because of the distances involved. It would take millions of years, right? And so to me, when we know that it's, the heliocentric theory is just total bollocks, flat Earth, it's very possible that there are other continents out there beyond what we know as the world. And if that's the case, then to me, it makes sense, because I'm sure you've heard this one before, right? That, okay, so you're telling me that aliens traveled a million light years to get here, and then they crashed in Roswell in the 40s, right? That doesn't sound like a very advanced civilization. Although if they were, say, 100 years advanced from us and are coming close by, by, then it's not that big of a leap to say that, okay, well, it's actually plausible now, not necessarily saying anything about infinite plane, not necessarily saying anything about the model, but if there's more land out there, or even if there's continents that we're unaware of or civilizations that we're unaware of, I would find it very likely that they would be curious to watch us, yet not interfere, to warn us by things like crop circles, because, crop circles is something that I've also always been very fascinated in. And yes, I know the story about the two guys with the planks that got drunk and did it, right? But not all of the crop circles are explained away that easily. And so perhaps if you take a look at the crop circles phenomenon again, there have been books written about them to where if you take the designs of all these different crop circles and spin them, certain ones, not the fake ones, but there's literally like the stalks are molecularly burned at a certain point to be bent over. They're not just, bent over. But you take these designs and stack them up and spin them, and it gives you pretty interesting results. I can't remember the name of the book. A couple of books I've read on this phenomenon, but a little bit of research might help. But so I don't necessarily, defend alien theory, but I will say that in flat Earth, it's technically theoretically possible to have other, humanoids. And that's the other thing, too. I mean, what are the odds of an alien coming from another quote-unquote planet and having one head, two eyes, a nose, a mouth, two arms, two legs? I mean, that is just it's ridiculous. And so if anything is humanoid flying these UFOs, if that is true, then it makes a lot more sense that they would be coming by someplace, or coming from, someplace nearby, not coming from, millions of light years away or whatever. So that's my two cents.
Also, we've got smaller. Why are they small? Why aren't they big? Why do they have to almost be the same size as us in machines? Okay, they're a bit. The machines, I've heard of the triangle ones the size of football pitches, but I mean they're not like them. Well, I don't.
If I can just say on this, that I'm a little bit like you, John, that I feel that the only thing, I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this the other day, that the only thing that I absolutely can 100% put my name to is that we're not on a globe. Everything else is open to debate. So I wouldn't be surprised that at a later date we found there is space, and I wouldn't be surprised there isn't. On every single subject, including aliens, all I'm trying to say is on aliens, I just don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to give it any house room. It doesn't mean I don't believe, or would I be shocked at a later date they're real? No, I wouldn't be shocked. I wouldn't be shocked in any of it. The only thing is the shape of the Earth. Really,
well, the other reason that I sort of I always do sort of defend alien theory, even though I'm really not interested in it. But think about it this way, though. I mean, how many millions and millions and millions of people are conspiracy theorists? And I know tons of them that will tell you that they believe in ancient alien theory, but they also believe that terrorists destroyed the World Trade Center, just as the 9/11 Commission report says. And so if you right off the bat say that flat Earth is mutually exclusive to alien theory at all, then you're just sort of automatically shunning the biggest potential portion of the conspiracy theory community that we really need to look at. We really need to look at cracking open, because I don't want to put up walls around flat Earth and say, well, you can't have aliens on flat Earth, because frankly, you can, and I don't want to shun those millions of people with open minds that are, I believe, being deceived.
John, can I just add one more point? Is that if they say that we are, the rumor is that we've been here anything between 6,000 years and 200,000 years, so they wouldn't be traveling to us millions of years ago, or millions of light years ago, because they'd be basically traveling to an empty planet, unless that's what they wanted. So if they were coming here, they were not coming here for us, because we were not allegedly around. So the only theory that I think would work on that would be wormhole theory for me.
Wormhole?
Yeah, I mean, if they were going to get here, unless it's like you said earlier, that unless they're coming close, because the nearest star is 4 and a quarter light years away. Everything else is massive distances. You've got Alpha Centauri, haven't you, and Proxima Tauri. But everything is from what they're saying, the models they're trying to push is that the distances are so huge that we just can't obviously get our heads around it. But obviously, it doesn't mean So I do agree with you about the whole concept, but again, the only thing that I think is absolutely a load of rubbish is the fact that we don't live on the globe.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's where I'm at. And so, the idea that these are civilizations that are millions of years advanced from us, and they could wipe us out with their technology. I don't believe any of that. I don't believe they, because the ancient alien theory, basically what they're saying is it's sticking with the ancient Sumerian tablets, right? That have been translated, I think, probably poorly by some, or just not poorly, but differently by different people. And the ancient Sumerians said that these beings that came from the sky made us to mine for gold for them. That's sort of the long and short of it. But I don't believe that anymore. But when you know that we're not on a ball, when you know that the heliocentric theory is a lie, I just love to point out, or I have to point out, that it doesn't necessarily mean that UFOs are all, man-made. I think a lot of them probably are, but it doesn't necessarily mean that automatically. So just something, it's something to just keep in the back of your mind, because I hate to push away people, because literally there's people that I guess you could say have formed a religion around ancient alien theory, and I would hate to build, barriers between them and flat Earth. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I think for me,
Thank you, John.
I think everyone would be quite naive if they were dismissing things. And I know that seems to be, going against what I've just said. That I'm absolutely 100% adamant that it's not, not a globe, but everything's up in the air, and they could. But the thing is, the biggest question is, are we on the right path? What we're investigating, or are we a million miles away from what we're meant to be doing? Because if the authorities are not really massively trying to shut us down, or maybe they are, but if they're not, then is it because we're so far away from hitting the hot spot and we're not anywhere near it? Are we deluding ourselves with what we're doing, and we're not worrying them because, or is it that they don't even know themselves? They know there is an issue, but they don't know what it is, and in a way, they'd indirectly be quite happy if we did find it, because they haven't managed. Maybe, I don't know.
I think most people have no idea, but I think that there are upper echelons of government. NASA obviously has people that know, but I would say that the majority of NASA doesn't know. I think that they've done such a good job brainwashing us as toddlers that they really don't have to do much to continue the lie going, because people just absolutely won't believe you when you prove this to them, right? So they have a good thing going for them. They really don't have to even address it. But I know they are doing things, though. I mean, I can tell you personally that they are doing things through social media and especially YouTube to disincentivize content creators from talking about this, and that includes everything from taking away subscribers, taking away view counts. I mean, YouTube literally changed their whole algorithm in the last few months. I think it was last November. It took away ad revenue from tons of channels, and they started doing this new thing I actually just noticed today, where they've pegged a good percentage of my videos as not suitable for advertisers, which is something I haven't seen yet. I had heard about, and now they have demonetized a good chunk of my videos for that reason, that they say it's not advertiser friendly. And these are not videos that are at all offensive or vulgar or anything but about flat earth and other related subjects. But they're definitely, they know. I mean, there are people that know this is going on, and they're really trying to play damage control. You can't put the cat back into the bag. However, they do know that I don't know, maybe 90% of the people are, even when confronted with this logically, are going to reject it, and they know that it's really up to the individual to go down this path and to do the research and come to their own conclusions. And frankly, most people don't care enough to do that. They prefer living in the matrix, the world that has been pulled over our eyes to blind us from the truth. And that illusion or that delusion is so powerful that, like I said, it's not like they have to put that much effort into fooling us. I would imagine it is quite easy.
Can I just add, Am I on? Yeah, I'm on. If you think about it, if you've got, for instance, officially you've got 100,000 views on one of your videos, or all your videos, but you've actually in reality got 1 million. Then yes, okay, it looks like it's 100,000, but you've reached 1 million. So even if they do dumb it down, you're actually still getting the reality of it is that you are reaching more people than they actually are trying to make out. So even if the numbers look like they've been dumbed down, you are still getting the views.
Well, yeah, they do dumb the numbers down, and you're right. I mean, people can't unsee a video, but you also have that sort of herd mentality where some people won't even click on a video if it doesn't have 100,000 views. But then you also have, like I said, the algorithm change, which a lot happened with that I can only speculate on based on my experience. But when people start complaining, like sending you, like I was getting 10 emails every day, 20 emails a day, people saying, I was subscribed to you forever. They unsubscribed me. So that was that whole bell thing. But now I get complaints all the time that people say when I put out new videos, they don't, even though they're subscribed, they don't get alerted. I don't come into their feed. And of course, random Joe Blow normie off the street is, on his YouTube account, will never find my videos unless he's looking for them. And so they can definitely do that. And in that sense, maybe we're spinning our wheels a little bit, but that's why, I agree a lot with Beyond the Imaginary Curve, Dell, that when you take this sort of thing to the streets, which is I've actually been doing, not on video, but take this thing to the streets and just start talking to people about it. That's going to be what takes us to the next level, because I think that social media is controlled, and we're not the ones in control of it.
Well, Jonathan, I have a video of a good friend of mine called the Barnon 11970. Maybe you have heard of the guy.
Who? What's the name?
Barnon 11970.
Oh yeah, I've seen his stuff.
He made a video with you can actually see that the thumbs up goes down a lot on some videos. I can share the video because Barnon and I are good friends, and he has said to me that I could always share his videos, and that's no problem.
Well, and here, yeah, exactly. Here's another thing too, and thumbs up sounds like a silly issue, but the way that YouTube works, the way I understand it, is that if your thumbs up to thumbs down ratio on a particular video is less than or more than 10% thumbs downs, then that video has basically no chance of going, quote unquote viral. And so what you'll notice is, especially like I'll do live streams just to see, and I'll ask people to give thumbs up, and for every 100 thumbs up that it get, automatically it gets 10 thumbs down. And so YouTube is sort of built-in automation that prevents truth channels from getting their videos out to the general public. If you do a video about bathing in Jell-O, that'll go viral. If you do a video about pouring a bucket of ice on your head, that'll go viral. But if you do a video about something that's going to rock the boat, especially in the last year when they've made these changes, it's very difficult. Very difficult. It's difficult for me to get my videos seen by 20,000, and I have 20,000 subscribers. So
I can show you the video now if you like.
Sure.
You can see it has now thumbs up 18,610. Yeah, and if you put your arrow near that thumbs up on some computers, it will jump, and I will play the video so you can see that it jumps. Here you go. Just a second, it will jump. That takes the time, but he's explaining that now he goes with this arrow. You can see it. He will just do it again. He's pointing out that it's at 1,880, about roughly 80,000 subs. Look, it goes. Can you see this?
Yeah.
This proves it. Damn. It goes down a lot. Not near. Almost more than 1,000 thumbs ups are gone. Just like that. And this is, I checked this video, and actually now it has only just above 1,000. So it's not near that number that you saw before. Not near that number. So they are hiding the thumbs up. And this is proof.
Maybe we are on the right track then.
Yeah, that's my conclusion, is that we are, because and again, people are very suggestible, and so if they see a video that has such a poor, that's a pretty poor ratio. That's a real poor ratio now. It was obviously not that bad before. People see that, and that's how they make their decisions. They'll just go with the herd. So it's sad, but hey, what can you do?
I just wanted to point out that you can actually find videos videos on YouTube that perfectly show they are measuring with the view counts and also with thumbs up.
Terrible. Can't even tell the truth about things. Sorry,
You want to
Chris.
finish off on the moon and stars again, or you want to carry on with it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah, I'll share the screen there for the moon and stars. Let me know when you can see it there. I'm sharing the application.
Yeah.
So what I did in this set of photos was, these are screen grabs off of a video of a high altitude balloon launch at night, and which there aren't very many of. I had to look for a long time to find a good night launch, which I think as a community, if people are thinking launching balloons to do it at night would be a great idea. You can actually see a lot more too. What I found in this video was, as the balloon was swinging around, the moon came into the view of the lens here, and you can see it's a flattened object, and it's shining towards the center of the photo as it comes in. And you can see there's a glare on the clouds above, so it's obviously close and glaring off the top of the clouds.
Oh, and Chris, I'll tell you real quick, just not to interrupt, but I'm very familiar with this video. This was the one where they were trying to capture the quadrantage, right? Over like
I believe so. Yeah. I think it is the same. Could be the same. Yeah, because I looked for a long time. I only found one or two videos of night launches, and they were looking for something specific. Yeah.
It might be in the one I used on my video.
It could be. Yeah.
Carry on.
So the next screen grab, a couple seconds later, you can see I just grabbed another shot because you can see the clear reflection off the top of the clouds. The light's still pointing, and the stars have now shifted slightly. And to show that it's definitely the moon, is I grabbed a shot when the lens was centered on the luminary object of the moon. That's what we're seeing. Here's the flat plane and the moon in the center. Now it's moved slightly, just the angle of the camera. Now you can see it's definitely almost in contact with the clouds here at this level. And I think it was 110,000 or 113,000 feet. What was interesting with this one was, when you go from this shot to this shot, you can see that now there's a star in the foreground, so it's closer to the camera than the horizon.
Huh. I can't believe I didn't notice that. Good find, man.
Yeah.
This is what my video's about.
Right. Then this star here stays pretty constant, and then the camera swings a bit. I'll zoom in on this one, and you can see there's the star again. There's the moon. What I found most fascinating about this shot, is I tried to get a close up of it, was this black line. So you can see there's a polarization. So the actual moon object, the emitter, would be really tiny in here, and obviously it's got a flat type of emission. So it's emitting in one direction and out the other in a polarized fashion. So the cone of light is, from your viewpoint, the cone of light's going away from you, and then this one's kind of coning towards you. And there's a cancellation, electromagnetic cancellation of light across the center plane, which was obvious. That's why I just tried to blow this up here. And I wanted to show that because that was what Mike and I were looking at in the detailed hamburger picture, just to go back a little bit. So
yeah, that actually does look exactly like a McDonald's single burger.
Single cheese hamburger. Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. So this would be the same type of effect, except now in this shot we're looking closer onto it. So the light's going out one way upward and coming down. Shadow is the same thing that we're seeing in this photograph up here, which is this black shadow. And now it's just, so what's happening here is you're actually looking at the disc kind of side on, right? Because there's one side versus the other, right? So it's going this way and this way. And the star thing that Anthony was trying to get me to go through real quick.
It's okay. I've turned into a stone statue now.
Okay. You're a salt pillar now, eh?
Yeah, I've calcified. It's gone now.
It's gone. Try to bring you back to life here. So what we had noticed was, I stumbled on this. I was like looking through pictures of stars, star trails, doing my research, and then it dawned on me that, well, here's a nice picture of a relatively calm lake at night with this beautiful sky. The trees are perfect, and you just look at all those stars in the sky. And then I was like, well, these two stars right here, if I put a little square around them, those two stars there are appearing in the water here, and so forth, right, and so on. And you start to line them up. It's like, well, where are all the rest of the stars?
Wow! And hey, look at this. Okay, if you look basically right at the center of the tree line, and then to the left, there's almost a perfect V of the two trees next to each other. It's like a perfect V of the negative space in between the two trees. The actual trees, not the reflection. So go left from center. No, go left and up. Left. You're there. Keep going left. No, left to that perfect V of negative space to the left, right there. You see it? There you go. You're on it right there. See that V?
Right there.
And then upside down, you get the triangle. Well, look at the two stars that are well, in the real sky, to the right side. You see how bright they are in the pool, but they're dim in the sky? Because you can tell those are the two same exact stars. Why are those two brighter and then none of the other ones are even there?
Right. Yeah, these two stars are right here in the water. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they get brighter. Wow. Okay. Yeah, awesome.
Right. So then I was like, okay, well, this might be an anomaly, so I'm going to have an open mind here. I'm going to check another photo, different area. I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe it's just some sort of weird refraction. So I picked another photographer, another area, totally different time. And I was like, well, there it is again. There's the two stars. There's the two stars. The majority of the stars in the sky aren't appearing in the water. And where is the entire Milky Way? You get a little bit of the Milky Way, but the majority of it is invisible. And again, another picture, the same effect, right? There's the two stars. There's the two stars, Milky Way. And so I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm going to have an open mind.
Don't forget to point out Orion's belt on that first picture.
Where was that?
You know, the first one that you showed? Orion's belt was in the bottom left-hand corner. Was it that one? I think it was that one.
That one, I think.
Let me try and remember where it was. Maybe it wasn't that one. One of them had Orion's belt, and you could clearly see there were clusters that were right near it that were reflected. I don't remember which one it was, actually.
Was it this one here?
I might have slipped up there. Maybe it's not the picture that I remember.
Oh yeah, here's Orion's belt. It's up in the right-hand corner here. And it's
that's definitely it.
Yeah, this would be maybe the Big Dipper in here. 1, 2, 3, 4 with the.
Chris, can I just add about Orion's belt that the distances between each one of those three stars are huge. I think the closest is something like 80 light years, furthest is something like 900, and it just absolutely dross. It just you can't have three stars so far apart in distance from us, and you can actually take it seriously. I can't see it. Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Anyway.
No, I agree. Yeah, this is the problem I'm seeing, right? So I was trying to have this open mind. It's like, okay, well, maybe it's just angular refraction and the temperature of the air, etc. Something's going on. Maybe the water is absorbing more light than it should. So I checked a whole bunch of pictures. This one here is like, okay, well, this one's more during daylight. It's the sun is just setting, but it's a great picture of the sky, image in the water of the mountain and the clouds, or you can even see the clouds, right? And it's like, well, there's still stars. A lot of stars are missing in the water, right? These two are here and they're up in here, right? There's the mirror image, but it's where's the rest of them, right? There's a little bit of angular refraction here. You can tell that these two stars are being stretched a little bit because of the angle, but there's less stars in the sky for sure. And then the last final piece de resistance here was like, okay, so these guys are looking horizontally, so let's find out if it's an angular thing, right? So I found this picture, which is absolutely phenomenal. And this guy, obviously the photographer person, is on top of something really high, looking at one of those perfect craters where we started off our conversation, right? Here's a perfectly formed crater, blast zone with a nice little crater at the top of the peak of the mountain, right, with the surrounding moat lake. And this is obviously time lapse, and you can still see, even from a downward angle, at least 50% of these stars that are tracking are not visible in the water. And this is obviously cold. That could be like a sheer ice sheet probably, because it's obviously wintertime. It might be perfect ice. So you think you can't get a better mirror than that, right? And so that tells me that what we're looking at in the sky here is when we're looking up through it, we're seeing this star being reflected into itself. And then this star is a duplicate of that star. This star is a duplicate of that star, and so on. So the distances between the two stars is like a mirror reflecting off another mirror. So the light isn't actually coming towards us, but we're looking up through it and seeing a reflection on the backside of a three-dimensional object that's acting like an infinity mirror. Like when you stand between two mirrors and look in one direction, it goes forever. But there's only one object in between the two mirrors. That's the conclusion I'm drawing from that, and I hope that makes sense. Do you guys agree, or what do you think?
Well, one thing that I'd like to see is the spectroscopy readings on the stars that, just to see if there's any difference in the frequency of the light waves from the stars that reflect and the ones that don't. And that would be an interesting study in spectroscopy. I'm not going to do it. Someone else can volunteer.
Yeah, I don't have the gear to do it. Yeah, I've done some experiments just myself here, going out at night with a good sized mirror, and then just taking the mirror, looking up at stars, turning my back to the stars, looking into the mirror and finding the same star formation and seeing which ones disappear and which ones appear in the mirror and that aren't in the sky. And it's hard to tell. I really have a really dark night, but I've seen the same thing, through my own eyes in the mirror.
Oh, in an actual mirror, huh?
Right. Take a mirror and just go outside on a dark night, take a mirror, look down into the mirror and point it up to the sky and see what you see in the mirror, and then just turn around and look up at the sky and see if it's different. Right. It's a little
This
head
is a
trip,
test that everybody can do. This is the test everybody can do.
Yeah, just to confirm it. And if you can actually have a mirror angled at the sky, take a picture of the mirror in focus, and then turn around and keep it in the same plane roughly, and take a picture of the sky, and then say this is the mirror image and this is the photographic image. And if you can compare the two and say that there's a clear difference, well, then I think we got pretty solid evidence that of what we're seeing here. Right? And then you have to check the spectroscopy, I would think, too. But
else as well, it wasn't my footage. It's probably the same footage that Chris used or took the pictures of. But as the balloon is going up on this night footage, you can see the stars below the balloon, and the balloon was up at, I think, 15 miles. It might have been 17 miles. So that meant the stars were at, some of them were at 14, 15 miles up. They're below the camera. You can see them.
Yeah.
So not as well, I'm not saying they don't go up higher, but the stars start much lower than we think they do.
Yeah, so I would definitely recommend that for anybody who's trying to do some flat Earth research, is to pursue that if you can. Night launches and mirror images of the stars and things like that. Just to
there's a couple, isn't there? There's this one you just said, and there's the one that everybody can go down to the beach or anywhere there's an expanse of water when the sun's there, and then see where the sun is, the rays are hitting. So to everybody in their own perspective, the sun comes to your own feet, but nobody else's. And that's a test everybody else can do. One, to realise what we're living in.
Yeah, indeed.
Guys, I got to step out. I got to be somewhere. John, nice to see you again. Chris, thank you for your explanations again, Chris. I'm sure it gets a bit repetitive for you, but it's ace for everybody else. But I gotta go, guys. So I'll speak with you again soon and have fun.
Anthony, you got your stars.
I did, but I changed into a calcified statue. See you later, guys.
Yeah, no, I've actually got to run. I got to run too. I've been on about 3 hours, and so I'm really fascinated. Chris, have you put together a video so that you don't have to explain this like every time, or?
No, I enjoy doing the lives, and I enjoy explaining it, and I get smoother at it all the time. So it's just good practice.
Well, I'm sure doing it well. It's not like it's been weeks. We've come together on these live hangouts, and Chris and Series. I know Series has been quiet, but they're working really hard in the background, and it's all happening over. It's taken weeks. Question for you, John the Morgile. You can't go without this question. Okay. What it is it's Marie in the chat room. She says, "How's your finger, Morgile?"
Oh, it's pretty much, I would say 99% healed. Yeah, it's a little numb, and there's definitely a little bit of bone missing in there, but you could barely tell. You would never tell that it was hurt. There's just a tiny little bit of scarring there, and that's it. So yeah, it's doing very well.
That's really good. Did you say that you had to go as well, John?
I do. Yeah, I got to run. I've been on about 3 hours, and I've got to be somewhere by 5, and so I got to go get ready. But it was really awesome hanging with you guys, and it was good to see some new faces. Good to hear your stuff, Mr. Chris Monk. You've got an open invitation to come on Glowbusters. Maybe you could shoot an email to Bob at Jaronism or Jaron at Jaronism to coordinate that. But I'm sure that the Glowbusters audience would love to hear your stuff, and Bob would be. Have you ever spoken with Bob?
Maybe they'd like to come on our channel.
Maybe they would. Have you ever spoken with Bob Nodell, Chris?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, well, you guys would hit it off nicely, I'm sure. So I can talk to him. I don't have your contact information. Maybe if you could link me up, or maybe I do, I don't know. If you could link me up, Karen, that would be awesome.
If John's going to go, we didn't do it with Anthony because it was a bit quick, but we usually have a group hug. I wondered if you'd help, John, and have a group hug with us on your way.
I actually don't have a webcam. I didn't bring it with me, so I can be here for it.
Chris, you're going to show yourself? Patricia, you did. Gary. See who was paying attention there. Chris? Oh, there he is. Yay! Yeah. Right. I'm just gonna. Yeah. Otherwise, we can't see John the Morgile. I see you're not presenting. Right. Anyway, thank you so much for coming on, John the Morgile. It's been really great. I hope you found that very interesting. And it looks like you're tied into another hangout now with Chris anyway.
Yeah, that'd be great. Just tell me when. Give me a couple days heads up, and I will do it for sure. So, it's always awesome hanging out with you guys. Really good talk today. A lot to think about, a lot to chew on, and I'm sure that every time that somebody hears this stuff for the first time, it just spreads, and I think that we are getting closer and closer to answers, and I'm just glad to see people that have expert knowledge and practical experience with these things, and scaling it up and applying it to reality. That's what it's supposed to be all about, right? So awesome stuff, guys.
Artist can't come back, but he hasn't got a camera, but we're going to give you a hug now. So everybody give John a hug and say thank you very much for coming on today.
Hey, and yes, if you could send me Ortiz's information as well too, because I'd like to stay in touch with you guys, and like I said, I'd love to hear this stuff.
I'll put letters in the description, and I'll send you the link, and then you can grab their details from the description.
Okay, that'll work. And I've already I've shared this live stream, and I've actually mirrored it on one of my playlists already. So I will I'll grab it from there.
John, before you go, can I just sorry to interrupt, Karen, but just let you know, John, that within the next 3 or 4 days, the website will be out for the convention. It's been taking up ages to get to the point that it's been ready, but it is literally we're at the final hurdle now.
Okay, awesome. Oh, that's you, Gary. I didn't even recognize you until you just said that. So Gary, yeah. Awesome, man. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, man. That's going to be in the end of April of 2018.
Yeah, you got it, 28th to the 30th, and I must admit, I'm really excited about you wanting to come over and you being with us. And what I'll do, John, is I'll write to you in the next few days with a link to the website, because what's going to happen is, I've said it before, but I'm going to give anyone on the landing page and any speaker, I'm going to give it to them on one day, and then the following day it's going to go live to everyone. But I want to make sure that people that are on the landing page putting the effort should have every opportunity, because there's only so many tickets available. I want to make sure that everyone gets a chance.
Gotcha. Awesome, man. Well, thanks for putting that together, and thanks for
you're right.
You took a lot of heat.
Yeah, well, to be fair, I mean, you said earlier about Shields sometimes can make things better. I actually think I do agree with you, because that person that can't be named did what he did. It didn't do me any harm. I thought at the time it really upset me, but within a day I was over it, and then everyone was giving me good feedback, and he was getting knocked for it, and I think in the end it was actually all good.
Yeah, man. Don't worry about it at all. I'm sure it'll be a smash, and I'm looking forward to it. So listen, I love you guys. It was awesome hanging with you, and I'll try to keep in touch. But really, the best way, Chris, I'll talk to Bob and Jaron and see what we've got slated. But if you're available on Sundays, I'd really love to have you and maybe Ortiz on Glowbusters, because what you're spitting there, man, some serious stuff, and sounds like you've pretty much nailed it, bro. That's just my opinion, but I think you've got it pretty much nailed.
I would have to agree with you, John.
Thank you,
Chris
for
and
the invitation.
All right, y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
Right,
yeah, take it easy, you guys.
I can't believe 3 hours has gone past. That went so quick.
Yeah, it does. All right.
Thank
I'm
you.
off, guys. Bye-bye.
Take care, John. Bye-bye.
Thank you for coming on again. Much longer, or should we end to hang out ourselves? Anything you want to say, Gary?
Yeah, only that I've only been on this hangout for best part of, I suppose it's about 2 hours from now, and I didn't obviously hear the beginning, but what I did hear and what a few of the guys are saying is this: it's brilliant stuff. I must admit, it's I think the quality of the hangouts is really good. I can't quite compare it with other hangouts because I don't really listen to them much, but the hangouts on here are just the variation of speakers and what they've got to say, and what Chris Artist had to say is just wow. It's just really good stuff. So I just want to say that. Thank
you, Gary. And what you're doing is amazing as well.
Well, I think if we all do our little bit, then we're just going to keep cracking them up and eventually it'll split.
We have been going for 3 hours. I'm probably going to say goodnight to everybody now, because we've done a lot of hangouts in this last 24 hours, whatever it's 2 days. The artists, thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah, well done, Chris.
Series, Patricia and Judith. And we're back tomorrow with Pyramid Talk at 9 p.m. time. Thank you, everybody in the chat room. It was a really gentle chat tonight in the chat room as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And thank you, John the Morgile. And we'll see you tomorrow. Everybody say goodbye then.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Love you all.